Africa is at an inflection point. Welcome to EESII, the Enabling Early Stage Infrastructure Investing Roundtable powered by the African Catalyst. Today, investors, developers, policymakers, and project sponsors come together to close Africa's most critical financing gap. At the very earliest stage of infrastructure development, this is where bold decisions are made. This is where the future is built. Introduce yourself in the chat, take your seat, and get ready. We begin now. Welcome to EESII, the Enabling Early Stage Infrastructure Investing Roundtable powered by the African Catalyst. Today, investors, developers, policymakers, and project sponsors come together to close Africa's most critical financing gap. At the very earliest stage of infrastructure development, this is where bold decisions are made. This is where the future is built. Introduce yourself in the chat, take your seat, and get ready. We begin now. Africa's infrastructure financing gap stands at $108 billion every year. Governments cannot close it alone. The private sector is ready, but it needs projects. Real projects. Bankable projects.
Meet our speakers for today's panel session. These are the minds shaping Africa's infrastructure and energy future. Nemo Joma Dugu, partner at Canaan Partners, a specialist in project financing, capital markets, and corporate commercial transactions with over a decade of experience advising on large-scale infrastructure projects across Nigeria. She has led transactions including one of Nigeria's largest infrastructure funds and a 500 billion naira real estate investment trust. Dr. Gori Olushino Daniel, a managing partner at AP3 Advisory. Dr. Daniel is a transaction advisor with over 25 years of experience across strategic management, PPP policy, and infrastructure finance. He has contributed to raising over $120 billion for large-scale infrastructure projects and has served as a senior advisor for PPP at African Development Bank Group. Erabo Okogo, managing director at the Infrastructure Bank, an infrastructure finance expert with over 20 years of experience in the energy, project finance and project development. He has led transactions backed by the FIs including World Bank Group, AFC and FMO, and was selected as a national expert in green investment by the World Economic Forum. Dr. Patrick Mwagi. Dr. Patrick Mwagi is the current East African Regional Manager at CAMCO. He is a renewable energy and infrastructure investment professional with over 13 years of experience in climate finance, project development, and investment management across sub-Saharan Africa. It leads investment origination and portfolio management for the $250 million REPP2 fund. Ochodomo Odeniye, Research and Operations Consultant at the Nigerian Wind Energy Council. Ochodomo is a current registered engineer who leads renewable energy research, policy initiatives, and stakeholder engagement to advance wind energy development in Nigeria. It brings over 7 years of experience in renewable energy operations, mini-grid monitoring, and policy analyst. Ahmad Damsida. Ahmad Damsida, the Chief Executive Officer at Energy Culture Limited. Ahmad is a project development professional with nearly 20 years of experience across energy, mining, transportation, agro-allied processing, and project finance. He has served as CEO of Energy Culture Limited for the past decade. These are the voices, the visionaries, the builders of tomorrow. The future of infrastructure starts here.
We all know the fact that Africa has been involved in infrastructure, and power has really been one of the main areas that the gap needed to be built. But for over the last 8 to 10 years, or even 15 years, quite an amount of focus has been on the photovoltaic technologies using solar radiation. And the question is this the only source of renewable energy, such that, what other form of renewable energy is available, and why is Africa not making use of those ones? And we just felt it was important for us to have a deep dive on what the issues are and why is every renewable project only focused on solar. Maybe we can have another 10 to 15% maybe on other related related sources, like as we said, like biogas and the likes. So my fellow colleagues, starting from Mr. Erabo, just to give, because you've been around, a lot of renewables, you've done hydro, you've done everything. And what's, in your new role that you are sitting, based from a lender's perspective, and also generally, what do you see as the play in the non-solar renewables? What exactly are your thoughts on that? Thank you, Mr. Erabo. Thank you.
A very good morning to you and everyone here, and to my distinguished panelists. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I think it's very important to set the tone by saying, even though we're talking about renewables beyond solar, the contrary view is not what we should sort of project, in a sense that there's nothing wrong with solar. So that's the first thing, as it were. But I think the crux of the matter is that there is the importance, based on policy, for the need of an energy mix. And the reason is that, given the fact that some sources, in this case solar, some aspects of it have to be brought into the country, panels and other balance of plants. It can be exposed to exchange rate risks. Other sources, for instance, biogas, hydro, biogas is from natural resources, in the sense that either from an agricultural waste, or there's a project we're looking at from animal waste, carcasses from butchers. For hydro, that's just running water, the water cycle wherever you are, be it pump storage, be it run on the river, hydro, small, large, and the like. So there are advantages of having an energy mix. And I think that from a banking perspective, there are a couple of critical components, whatever the technology. For some non-solar, for instance, biogas or waste energy, one of the critical things that we've seen is the sanctity of the supply chain. If you take animal waste, for example, I remember in the UK, the butchers used to discard the skin, the chicken feet, other things, and people used to use that to generate biogas, until a large number of Nigerians came and they started buying those things, and it was no longer available for the biogas producer. Same thing even here. If you look at waste, there are a lot of pickers who pick up this waste and who are recycling it before it can get even to where you can either use it in the furnace or biodigester. So the sanctity of supply is critical, but more fundamental are the economics. The sponsor.
Yeah, hello, Erabo. I think he's breaking a bit. Just wait a while. But while waiting, Dr. Gori, maybe because his network is breaking, I think we've lost him. Yeah, okay, Dr. Gori, you can share your own views based on having advised over 120 billion of projects, and what gaps are you seeing, especially in small scale hydro, as well as wind, and how can those start becoming more bankable in Africa? Go ahead, please, sir. Okay, you're muted. You need to unmute.
All right. Am I audible? I think
Correct, you're audible.
I think Arabo is back. If you want to bring him in,
Okay, he's back. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Arabo. Okay, please just finish up. You got logged out. So that we can go to. Oh, is he back? Okay, you can unmute, sir. You can unmute and speak. Okay, I don't think so.
Yeah, he's not.
I'll bring him in.
So, good morning, everybody, and once again, thanks for the invitation to be part of this important discussion. We always like to hear from lenders, because when we talk about the bankability issue, really what we're talking about is how do you structure a project to ensure that financiers say yes. So this is why whenever we can get Mr. Okogun back, I think this panel will be the better for it. To your framing and to your question, let me address that first, if I may. I want to align with Mr. Okogun. I don't want us to have a conversation that sets a context that solar isn't important. I think the real framing and context of this is that it's important to diversify the renewable energy mix, which I think is great. And we have projects that are driving this that I might be able to come to. A lot of these technologies that we're now looking at are really where solar was 10 to 15 years ago. High promise, great challenges in terms of bankability. So there's a lot that we can learn from the solar experience, which is why it's important to send that context. But across the technology stack that we're looking at, wind, biogas, and hydro, we find in our practice 5 failure points that need to be tackled. The number one is the resource data, and that resource could be whether it is organic waste for biogas projects, whether it is hydrological flow for hydro, and whether it is actually wind speed for wind. So you really need to solve for that. But I would say, and I always say, that the biggest challenge is really the idea of revenue assurance, right? So how do you secure offtake? How do you ensure that the plant is designed with the end user in mind, and the end user can afford to pay, the end user is willing to pay? The other challenge is the scale of the projects. We are running a pilot of 3 run-of-the-river projects, which individually, because of the ticket sizes for most concessionary finance institutions, may be small, and we're finding that aggregation is a way to tackle that. I know that we'll come to that question. I think the question of the currency and financing mismatch has already been addressed, so I won't tackle that. But also, we underestimate the sort of interagency coordination, governance that is required for these projects to be able to go forward. So the issue is not technology, right? It's really around preparation. It's really around risk allocation. It's really about credible revenue. But let me touch a little bit on biogas, because our folks would want me to mention this. Bankability really drives, in my view, on ensuring that you can assure revenue from offtake, and that is underpinned by affordability and willingness to pay. And so when we look at those 3 technologies, for instance, we've got to bear in mind, from a biogas perspective, it's almost double the cost in terms of the levelized cost of energy, solar and wind, right? So you've got, and that is not because the digesters are expensive. It's really, really because of the logistics, right? So transporting your feedstock and all that goes into that, the logistics of transmission, all that goes into that. What it does, it increases the cost of electricity. So, these in terms of an opening gambit is what I would say. Solve for those five things. That's what we need to deal with. The technology, is essentially de-risked. We've got to also bear in mind the maturity of the technology. Biogas I've mentioned, where this is prevalent in East Africa, we've noticed, Irina have noticed anywhere between 23% and 33% displacement, right? Abandonment, which makes it operationally fragile. The challenge with that is that undermines your revenue assurance. How do you ensure that your generation is stable? But there are broader issues. And I'm going to close with one that we mustn't forget. When we speak to financiers, they're not just looking at your project as an isolated project. They're looking at your entire supply chain, your entire value chain. More generation with a fragile grid infrastructure has some serious bankability issues to tackle. And that is why the models that we're working, maybe we'll get into that, solve for that through embedded generation, for example. I see Mr. Okogun back. He's a makes financing decision, so I'll yield to him.
Thank you.
And happy to step in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gori. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Okogun. So I think the last time before you got cut off, you were giving your views regarding, post-solar and this alternative. So maybe you can wrap up quickly before we go into the other side. Other participants. Thank you.
I'm not sure what happened to my network. I think there's a firewall on my system. But yes, I think the point I was making is that, always for power, I believe it's very important we look at the fundamentals. What is power for? Power is supposed to be for productive use. It's supposed to be an enabler. And the rule of thumb in any developing country or country that wants to develop is that for every 1 million people in the productive workforce, in Nigeria, I think we probably have about 90 million people. And you can use certain proxies to validate that. A number of smartphones, number of ATM cards, and number of BVNs, for example. And that's like, 90 gigawatts of power that we require. And given the energy access limitations and the statistics where we still have, I think, 50%, it means that we've got to throw a lot of technologies at this problem. And based on our energy resources, we have hydro, we've got fantastic rivers, we've got a huge arable land, so it produces quite a bit of bio waste. We have obviously a huge urban population, so there's a large quantity of urban waste. And there's been wind studies. I did a nearshore wind project, which had a PPA with EcoDisco for about 70 megawatts a few years ago. And there's been a project, I think, in Jos, and I think there's been other wind pilots. So the wind speed with the technologies has also made it, wind bankable in Nigeria. So if you look at our energy mix, we have hydro on the grid, about 50% or 40%. We've got gas. Off grid, we're talking about solar, but most importantly, diesel. Right? So there's a lot of displacement that needs to happen. And any solution that you're using to displace diesel from an affordability perspective should be liquid. The critical thing is the business model, your go-to-market model, and making sure that you've tied up your commercials, your regulatory, and the technology, and certainly have some skin in the game. I think that we have a longer tenure capital available, either through pension funds or with the capitalization that has happened, where there's about 4 trillion new capital in the banks. So there's a lot of capital that is available. But I think project preparation and developers really being able to connect the energy with the productive use, with the critical elements to drive the adoption of other technologies. Back to you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. So these issues are clear, and I'm happy about the I mean, you come from the legal and regulatory perspective, and what are currently, I mean, I know that NERC has done a number of work related to renewable energy and some regulations. But what other regulations are you seeing or framework that you think will impact into wind or biogas or small scale hydro? Nemo, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I actually was going to ask if it was me because the network cut for a bit.
Okay.
Good morning. Thank you again for the invitation. And it's been quite interesting to hear from the, I think, technical and financial side of what the concerns have been. Honestly speaking, you did mention the key aspects of NERC. The Electricity Act, by its nature, has done a lot of work in creating that environment and promoting some encouragement for other regulators to kind of step up and permit the introduction of renewable energy. If I get you correctly, if the question is regarding what other laws or what other frameworks am I seeing, on a large scale, what we have now is that almost every sector that has some adjacent relationship with renewable energy investment has some form of framework already existing to encourage it. So if we look at the FMDQ, tried to create, and I think it's still operational, the exchange system for green bonds. The Nigerian Exchange Limited also has something similar. The Securities and Exchange Commission also has regulations on green bonds. So we see that there's a lot of encouragement regarding regarding the development of some renewable energy in the country and improving on it. The government on its own too has been seeking funding, and there's been quite a number of millions coming into the country in USD. So the question now is that how well do the systems that we have, collective or individually, how well can they work together? One of the things that I'm hoping will be helpful is that there is a National Council on Climate Change. And hopefully, if that system is able to have a more cohesive framework, we definitely would have a better chance of there being a uniform and harmonized structure towards the climate change or what the renewable energy next few years is going to be, market is going to be. So we have the taxman doing its best. So the VAT, I think modification order also has some exemptions for people importing. There are VAT exemptions. There's the Pioneer Incentive Scheme that also has some exemptions. There is the, I've mentioned the SEC, the NGX, the Electricity Act. There is also some specific fund, I think it's the Power Sector Development Fund. So we have so many of these different laws that are in place. Then obviously the Petroleum Industry Act, which just came about a couple of years back also has laws encouraging renewable energy, creating systems for the incentivization of gas flaring and how best we can use that to encourage and develop more renewable energy systems. The issue we have, honestly speaking, in Nigeria is not a lack of systems or not a lack of agencies or not a lack of laws that are trying to encourage it. What we have instead that I think is lacking, and I know that was not specific, but really that is my position, is that there is no harmonization of how we address renewable energy, whether it be biogas, whether it be the solar system. There's not a harmonization of what systems are put in place to address this. And it's key to mention this because one of the things that any lawyer would tell you is or even people on the operational side would tell you is that in almost any system within the energy space is that there's always a conflict between regulators of who has the authority. And we're going to see that most likely that even with the Electricity Act giving the local states authority over the creation of laws within their states, that most likely regarding systems that would be cross-state or cross-intrastate, that there's going to be issues along the line of who has certain oversight over those functions. And this is because of the incentives coming in, because of the incentives being developed, and the fact that there's a lot of money on board, other people are going to put their eyes on that system. So it is key for us to harmonize the systems. But I believe I have listed and mentioned quite a number of the regulatory structures available at the agencies. But the gap that is in the system is a harmonization of the structures to ensure that there is a more structured approach to the country, encouraging and developing it. As we see it now with this decentralized, yes, but also unharmonized system that we have, I do not see us having that or achieving our renewable energy goals if we do not harmonize things as quickly as possible. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a great one. And thank you for those very kind remarks. I'll now move on to Mr. Ahmad. You've been doing a number of work at Energy Culture with respect to renewable energy and a few other things, transport, EV, and just basically, so what role do you think, and I know a number of electronic technologies still need some form of charging. Most of them are doing it from solar today or the grid. But what role do you think these alternatives can also play? Thank you.
Thank you very much. These alternatives are actually complementary if you look at it critically. So, for example, if you look at wind, the fact that the sun will not shine all through the day, and then the wind tends to blow at better hours of the day, despite the variability and the gust, both of them can actually work together in blend with the support of a battery energy storage, which is critical, right? Another renewable component that sits as the bedrock for enabling that variability to disappear. Now, if we look at them as standalones, we won't see the value. So, for example, if you look at small-scale hydro, the opportunities exist far from human settlement in most cases, or close to rural settlements that basically do not have the capacity to consume all of it. So it means that there is an infrastructure play that needs to integrate that power system or that technology to enable the commercialization make sense. Sometimes it increases the cost. Other times it optimizes in terms of having to distribute it properly. But you see, maybe when people go for solar first as the time to market aspects of solar, the time to market is very, very valid. The others require a different form of design and configuration preparation, right? Solar doesn't. Yes, wind is sold also off shelf most times these days, but then the infrastructure to install a wind turbine requires a lot of piling work, especially if the location is somewhere close to the coast. Solar, you don't need too much of the piling. You just need to cast concrete and then install it, and that's fine. This can be done in weeks or months. How can all of this help provide electricity to support other technologies, EVs, for example? So currently we operate a very large EV fleet. I think we have probably the largest in Nigeria now, getting to 300 plus, if I'm not mistaken. Then we have a system that gives us net of 120 kilowatts of solar to charge all of the vehicles, right, at one location. Now, that system is a solar system that depends on batteries. So we have a large battery capacity. Combined battery capacity today, it's about 1.4 megawatts. At a single location, we have 780. Another one, we have 460. Now, any day rain falls, that power is out. So what's in the battery gets consumed. But if we were able to collocate a wind turbine within the same environment, the wind turbine would recharge the battery when the sun is out. And that serves as a complementary power source that can actually displace the need for intervention from the grid and also diesel power, right?
Yes.
If you look at biogas, lately, people have focused more on biomass than biogas. Why? So because biomass easily integrates into their project. So if you look at the agro-allied guys, the rice farmer, right? They'll make use of the rice husk and then, generate electricity easily. But for biogas, the issue has been around the logistics tied to collection of the feedstock. If you look at the size of the digester and look at the output of electricity from that digester, the unit economics wouldn't make sense if you don't have an immediate source of that feedstock next door. It wouldn't. I mean, the digester is there. It can serve you for 20 years, no problem. But then if you look at the size and look at the output of electricity from that size, right? If you don't have the feedstock next door, just right next to you, it'll be a problem. So that also has limitations around where to operate it. In the Western world, they can have it in urban settlements. But trust me, in Africa, it's going to almost be impossible to have it within urban settlements or within even a business community or environment. Why? Because the pollution the feedstock would cause might deter or cause some other uprising around environmental issues. So I think it depends on which of them pairs up better with the next.
Okay.
Small scale hydro and solar would work well. This is the natural marriage. If you look at what usually happens, flow of water, gets dammed, and at a certain point, you allow it to spin the turbines. Now, if that water flow is hindered by either current movement, right? It is most times because the sun is shining. And if the sun is shining and you're able to trap what the sun is generating into a battery system, that hydro component with the battery and the solar would basically give you a seamless VRE, right?
Right.
And this is one thing that I think we should look at. Let me not bore everyone with the technicalities, but this is basic.
Thank you so much. Yeah, very good. I know you like to go into the real technical stuff. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Patrick, thank you out of East Africa. What have you been seeing? At your own end. And work that's been done by Campo, and what are the trends related to biogas, wind, or small scale hydro, and also your investment vehicle and in terms of your activities? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Femi, for allowing me to speak. So to start with, look, within East Africa, just going into the various technologies, the one that we see having, the most compelling investment opportunity is definitely the small-scale hydro. And the reason for this is because it offers, stable, low-cost, dispatchable baseload electricity, particularly once construction is completed. And this is attractive, particularly to the electricity systems, which are seeking now reliability, and also industrial customers who also require power around the clock. So small-scale hydros in East Africa, at the very least, is what we see really ticking in terms of the technology. I know it's a bit different from what we've seen in West Africa, very different. There is more, it's a different angle, but let me skip that for now. I don't want to dive too much into that. But separately, biogas is also becoming increasingly attractive. Although for us at Camco's Rep2 Fund, it's not one of the investable technologies that we have. We mostly focus on solar, wind, hydro, and battery storage. But nevertheless, we're seeing an uptick in biogas within the market, particularly where there's reliable feedstock, say in sugar mills, livestock farms, breweries, etc. And also it offers another angle with diversified revenue sources, whereby you can get some carbon revenues, through the avoided methane emissions. So that's also an interesting angle. One more rising significant opportunity, although it's generally requires larger ticket sizes, longer development cycle, and a bit more rigid grid integration planning, which makes it a bit more challenging for early stage investors. So generally, I would say, where I see things moving in the next, let's say, 5 years or so, is a bit of hybrid and complementary renewable energy solutions, where hydro, the biogas, and the wind strengthen the overall system reliability rather than competing with solar. So that's on the one end. But the overall trend that I think we would like to make sure that, let's say, developers are aware of is, as investors, we're primarily looking at bankability. And I think this is something that's been mentioned before. So it's more about bankability more so than just impact. A few years ago, having a strong development narrative was enough to start discussions with an investor. But today, we want projects to be a bit more mature before committing resources. And I think I can maybe point out to five key trends that I think developers should understand. First one is obviously on project readiness, and I think Dr. Gori, you also alluded to this. It's a key thing. Obviously, investors would want to see completed studies. Do you have a clear execution plan? Often projects that reach investors too early often struggle to secure funding. So that's the first one. The second one I would say is, again, on revenue certainty. I won't dwell too much on it, but the question is no longer just whether energy can be generated, but whether revenues can be actually reliably collected, right? So this involves looking at whether the off-taker can pay, whether the contracts are enforceable, and whether payment delays or currency mismatches can be managed. This is a key one because oftentimes when we lend in hard currencies, so dollar or euros, but the revenues that the developer is actually getting are in local currency. So we need to have a solution for that. Generally, across the sub-Saharan space, we're seeing also a growing interest in CNI and mini-grids. Most investors are now looking beyond our typical large utility scale projects. And these markets often reach financial close more quickly and reduce sovereign exposure. Yeah? So we're seeing this cutting across the entire sub-Saharan African space. So that's another key trend. That's the third one. The fourth one I would say is to do with climate resilience. it's now a core investment consideration. It's not just an ESG issue anymore. So, we're looking at, can the project perform, let's say in the case of hydro, with changing rainfall patterns, how does that look? What's the climate, long-term climate variability? What happens with the drought? Well, have the drought and flood risk been mitigated, for example? What's the risk of extreme weather events? So this is also a key thing for us within Canco. It's something that we really monitor even throughout the tenure of the debt products that we provide to projects. It's something that we really monitor and really take keen eye on. And then finally, I would say is local partnerships matter more than ever. That goes without saying. So we often value or favor developers who have a strong local presence. They have an ability to engage with the community, in a very close manner. They have strong regulatory understanding, and also have proven operational track record. So a lot of the deals that we're pushing right now and are moving faster have this sort of element built in. And often the strongest projects typically combine local execution capability with international technical and financial expertise. So those are the trends that I would like to summarize.
Thank you so much. And finally, to Mr. Odinia, you've done a lot of work on wind, and quite a number of research is going on there. I would like to hear from you, basically, what significant resources you think Nigeria has, and how can this be best utilized, in the wind energy space? Go ahead, sir, Mr. Odinia.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So thank you for that question. So Nigeria, based on what that's already know, that Nigeria possesses commercially viable wind resource across the northern parts of the country and some central island and also coastal regions. But you agree with me that potential alone is not automatically translating to projects. You need to create that enabling environment for investors to come in. And so, based on this question you asked, I'm going to take it in 3 to 4 or 5 perspectives when it comes to the interventions that are needed to unlock commercial scale for wind development in Nigeria. The first one is when it comes to getting clear national policy for implementing wind energy development in the country. And it's good that currently we have the EU GTAP team, which was commissioned by the Federal Minister of Power, has gone to draft the Nigeria Wind Energy Roadmap Strategy and Action Plan, which I think the EU validation workshop was said sometime last month, which points us to that direction that this particular line of item is going to help to unlock commercial scale wind in the country. And the second one is we need to have, for us to have that investment framework in the country, we need to carry out key resource assessments and measurement campaign across the country. Because for investors to see wind as a potential opportunity for investment, you need to have high quality bankable data, which is something you also require finances to be able to carry out. For you to deploy, for instance, megmaps to measure wind speed above 100 meters orbit, you need over 100 kDOS to just procure one system. This particular intervention is necessary if we want to unlock the wind energy sector. And at the Nigerian Wind Energy Council, we have been carrying out on our part, in our little way, starting with deploying weather stations somewhere in the northern part of the country, that's Plateau State. Across 4 local governments are 10-meter uprights with these weather stations. So the plan is just to show proof of concept to get this data across this 4 local government and then carry out an hybrid demonstration project. So the plan is to generate this data over a period of 3 months, then use the generated data to decide which of these locations is best to site this hybrid project. We know for you to prove a point when it comes to what's possible, there must be a demonstration to prove that. And that's what we are trying to achieve there. So the project is ongoing. We started earlier this year in Plateau State, and we are approaching the end phase of the project. I think sometime in September, we should be having that final recommendation on which of these sites has the best wind. But that's just for small scale wind deployment, not for utility scale. So for utility scale, we need this bankable data by deploying MECMAS or LIDAR system to call it a bankable data. That's for item number 2 when it comes to how to unlock the wind energy in Nigeria. And as I mentioned earlier, for it to be bankable, you need to carry out measurements above 100 meters and also deploy MECMAS. And the third is we need to carry out early stage project development support. So this project development phase support includes feasibility studies, environmental and social impact assessments, project preparations, and alongside resource assessment, which I mentioned earlier under the number 2 item. So I believe this is also linked to when I mentioned about the demonstration project, because as we know, solar did not just start very big. It started from somewhere. And so wind also needs to start from that stage, from that small stage before we move to the higher stage. So it's very important that for it to also unlock the sector, early stage project development is very important. The fourth is when it comes to the grid infrastructure and transmission planning. So for us to unlock the wind sector here in Nigeria, I believe it is important for critical assessment around the grid infrastructure is necessary, and also planning, especially around areas where we have high wind speed in the northern part of the country. So it's very important that such planning is being done, and that will now tell on what the roadmap will tend to be able to achieve. And finally, in terms of areas where we can be able to unlock wind energy development in the country is having stronger collaboration among key MDAs, institutions, development partners, and project and development organizations. So when you have that strong collaboration, it gives the industry that confidence to push further in order to achieve what the sector tends to achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much on that regard. Just as a second review, Dr. Gori, just as you were sharing, what do you think from your own experience, right, that needs to be done beyond the aspect of demand, as you mentioned, certainty, from a supply chain perspective? I know Nigerian government tried to do waste to energy or biogas to energy so many times, but the raw material supply kept on becoming a big issue. It wasn't something that was that made the industry felt confident. So in your own view, what do you think should be in place to really make the industry attractive again? You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you for that question. It's an interesting question. You've obviously picked up on the fact that biogas is important. There are real opportunities there. I think my friend and brother Ahmad mentioned about cases where biogas and biomass is an important solution, particularly around agribusiness and agriculture areas where there is significant waste. The issue is the feedstock, right? And the location of the feedstock and the sourcing of the feedstock. But, I can only tackle this question from the viewpoint of an economist, right? We have an affordability issue for electricity in Nigeria and Africa broadly. And so when we think about options, we need to make sure that we are structuring biogas plants where we want to, where feedstock is guaranteed. So we have a project based in Tanzania that we have been looking at around the sourcing of market waste. And to be honest, for the last 18 months, the key challenge is ensuring that the right sort of waste and the right sort of quantities, because what we have seen in Kenya, and our colleagues from East Africa will back this up, Uganda and Tanzania, is that, for instance, in Western Tanzania, there was like 58% non-operational because of feedstock demand. And, your question is framed around, government and what more can be done. These are market solutions, right? And for me, the biggest thing is what you don't want me to talk about, right? The biggest thing that you need to solve for in the power sector is to make sure that you have secured offtake. And that secured offtake is not just people saying we will take this power, it's figuring out how that power gets to them. We have system-wide issues that need to be resolved. And, in a world where there are no transmission issues, for instance, Lake Turkana is a massive challenge where they incurred over 23 million euros in fines because not necessarily fines. 23, I don't have an issue with technology. The issue that I have is technology driving decisions, right? So the idea of pushing biogas because it's a renewable is not really where we should be having a conversation when we're talking about bankability. We need to solve for offtake. We need to think about where biogas plants are located. The solution is solve for the feedstock, reduce to a bare minimum transportation costs if you can, because that is what is driving up that cost, and then that's bankable. And then you've got to figure out how the power that is generated can be utilized in terms of productive use. So you will know that we have 3 pilots of run-of-the-river hydros, and these are projects in Nigeria, and these are things that we are grappling with at the moment. We have a site in Kano, Gari Dam, where we have resolved that the only bankable way of tackling that is to stimulate demand, because these are in rural areas where there's not a great deal of productive capacity. So we are working with CanInvest and suggesting to them that when people are coming to you and asking for parcels of land to use to site their factories, to site their operations, drive them to Gary because there's power coming there, right? Because we know that in order to make that project bankable, yes, we have REA support, which we've been able to negotiate, and this goes to that idea of interagency support. We've been able to bring in the REA to provide a minimum subsidy tender for when that project is live. We've been able to bring in UNIDO to bring concessionary capital for project preparation and to offtake about 70% of the capex. So we're solving for affordability by bringing in concessional capital to de-risk that project. But we know we need to go even further, because relying on domestic rural households alone will not, square the economics that needs to be squared for the project to be bankable. So we're now thinking, okay, and I guess it was one of my fellow panelists that mentioned that you need to ensure that, I think it was Mr. Okogo from the lender, you need to make sure that it's tailored to productive uses. So I've given a general answer for all the different technologies, but my story remains, it's not about the technology. Biogas makes sense. The evidence suggests where you have solved for feedstock, where you have reduced the logistics around distribution to the minimum, because that's what makes it twice as expensive. Why pay twice as more when there are solar, wind, solutions that you can use? And I want to reinforce the point that, the reality is that the beautiful thing about this conversation is that we're recognizing the complementarity.
Recording in progress.
Definitely, I agree. Solar will definitely play a strong role. But as we have exchange rates, pressures, importation pressures, some countries may be more attuned to, a biogas because of their livestock. Maybe they have a big dairy ecosystem within their country, and they're having a waste problem in itself. So in 1 minute, what do you think if you look at the future that government should do if they want to benefit? Either you can just choose one, either from solar, wind, or small scale. You can just focus on one and just give us your final recap.
Yeah, thanks a lot. If I was having a chat with the new minister and the new special advisor the other day, and one of the critical things from the government perspective is two things: market design and tariffs, right? And if you use market design, for instance, in the Electricity Act of 2023, I think Section 64 is thereabout, 67. There's an obligation, renewable energy obligation for all GenCos and also for DISCOs. And also, if you look at net metering, for example, that just got passed, there's an opportunity to prioritize renewable energy. In fact, it's probably the fastest way to implement net metering, given the usual scenario whereby, at least for now, the renewable energy sources are small capacity and used in homes or SMEs, right? And so for me, on the government side, to drive bankability, to drive economies of scale, which impacts affordability, providing policies that will incentivize the uptake and use of renewable energy sources, as we've discussed, and encouraging, not necessarily go back to feed-in tariffs, but encouraging some prioritization of dispatch or prioritization of offtake when it comes to regulation, for instance, net metering. That will create the deal pipeline that will drive funding of a certain scale and of a certain pricing, and also signal to the global pools of capital that Nigeria and Africa is aware, is de-risking and creating significant deals and opportunities for deals. Also, if you look at Francophone Africa, which I find quite interesting in the way they do projects, and it's something I think Dr. Gori mentioned with these hydro projects, there is an alignment between parties, which you don't see in Anglophone Africa. And let me clarify that. So if you... Yes, sorry, right?
Yeah.
So I think finally is to find innovative models, either lease to own, power as a service, changing capex to opex, aligning users with the energy source. Those are ways in which the state level, the federal level, and also DFIs and policymakers can drive renewable energy uptake to reduce poverty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll go to Nemo. Your final, takeouts on this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
1 minute, please. Just 60 seconds.
I would stick to the 1 minute. I think it's been very enlightening to hear the different perspectives also from the different sectors involved in the project. As I mentioned before, I would reiterate my position that a key aspect is harmonizing the systems we have so that there's a more structured approach to achieving the goals. So whether it be from the financing side or the operational systems technicalities with what our core regulators are doing. So we think of NERC, we think of the Petroleum Industry Act. With what the regulators are doing, I think the structured approach, a harmonized structured approach, is what would ensure that we get to the assumed and hopeful destination. Thank you.
Thank you. Patrick, your final takeout? Patrick, your final, final thoughts on this session for 1 minute.
I think the key thing that cuts across all the themes is, if we have one priority that we need to focus on is trying to close the project preparation gap. And maybe I can just leave one party short and say that capital is a seed, but bankable preparation is a soil that it needs to grow, right? So I think that's how we leave it.
All right, then. Thank you. Before I go to Mr. Ahmad, I'll go to Dinia. Your final takeout on this session, please.
Okay. So for me, I think the priority should be in terms of any project development, because for us at the Nigerian Wind Energy Council, one of the challenges we have been facing is how to, should I say, deploy the demonstration project, which is around small scale wind. We have been saying, yes, there's wind available, and it is something that the country can intend to adopt in order to have a kind of other options in terms of renewable energy. So for me, the early project development phase is the key and very important. And if we need to unlock this sector, we need to start showing this commerciality of these sources by deploying small-scale projects around all these renewable energy sources. This will now encourage further support from investors, the government itself, and also institutions that are interested in the sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ahmad, finally to you, before we close out, your final takeouts on this session. If there's one thing you would like us to do or government to do, just in 1 minute.
So thank you very much. I think the most reasonable thing to do is basically to de-risk the entry levels. And if you listen to what the man from, I think it's Mr. Odinia, from the Wind Energy Association mentioned.
Council.
Council mentioned. Studies, surveys, and evaluations are very critical, and the lack of data is a major hindrance to project development. So it is good to have this data available, right? The government has the capacity to attract the grants that would fund the acquisition of this data, and governments across Africa have been doing this. I think it's very important that we start to take data seriously. right? If you remember, what actually accelerated solar in Nigeria and some of the other African countries is the World Bank's grant that studied the radiation levels across horizons. And this is very important. If we don't have the data that's necessary to deploy wind, for example, to also deploy large-scale or mass numbers of small-scale hydro units, it will be a problem. Of course, logistics around the biogas, for example, as a function of having good roads and the network that is viable for optimization. Right, that's another story entirely. But government should invest in the early stage de-risking through acquisition of data that would enable SSEs be very adoptable, so that the studies, surveys, and evaluations become very adoptable.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, lady. Thank you, all gentlemen aboard. I'm very happy that we've been able to deal with the issues. And issues from tariff, issues from the early stage preparation, issues relating to having, ownership structures like lease to own, and a few other things have been well discussed. Thank you once again for this panel session. It's been a wonderful time spending with all of you, and we will have another opportunity to gather again. And thank you. I really appreciate this. But without wasting much time, I would say we'll close out this panel session now, but the discussion still continues. The Enabling Early Stage Infrastructure Investing Roundtable is basically driven to help the early stage. And that is really why the African Catalyst has taken upon itself to focus on conferences, events, meetings that deal with the early stage, because a number of developers are listening to this program on YouTube, and they're gaining insights, and they're gaining, the clarity they need to get. Some of them may be thinking that, biogas cannot work again, but now it can work in itself. And one of the things I wanted to see is that I see biogas as the future of mini-grid in agro-remote areas that are doing big cattle. Why are we disturbing ourselves with the extract? We take the extract, we put it in a digester, and around 20-kilometer radius, even 5-kilometer radius, we generate our electricity. And we know we are doing cattle, back to back. Dairy is big, the likes of Nestle, and the likes of all these farms and all these dairy companies, food and beverage companies. They want to do a lot of dairy. They need dairy. I know Sahel Capital was really big on dairy at a particular time. It's a logical move to just join a digester to that and do a biogas. But without wasting much time, thank you, everybody. And over to you, Chisom, for the next steps in the SE program. Thank you, everyone. Thank you once again.
Okay, so I would like to say a very huge thank you to you, Mr. Femi, and to the panelists for a very rich conversation. Also very, very rich questions. One of the major things that was talked about was bankability and credible offtake. And regarding the law and policy side, Mrs. Nemo emphasized on harmonization, saying that the laws and policies that support renewable energy in Nigeria currently exist, but there's lack of harmonization, and there's always some kind of conflicts, between regulators. Mr. Patrick was also very generous by sharing with us 5K trends for project developers. I also able to get the third one, so I'd really appreciate it if he can share that with us in the chat box. But he mentioned project readiness, he mentioned revenue certainty, climate resilience, and local partnerships. So if you got the third one, please share it in the chat box. All right. So we've covered a lot of ground from the many pathways for renewable energy. What was shared today will definitely stay with us as we keep thinking through early stage infrastructure projects. So now, without much ado, we'd like to take opening remarks from Mrs. Destiny Donald Igwe, our corporate compliance lead at the African Catalyst. Over to you, Mrs. Destiny.
Thank you, Chisom. All protocols are duly observed. It is both an honor and a privilege to address this distinguished gathering at the third edition of the Enabling Early Stage Infrastructure Investing, and I commend Mr. Femi Awofala for creating a platform that continues to shape and sharpen critical conversations around Africa's infrastructure and investment future. We have just finished the panel session where we witnessed critical conversations surrounding Africa's infrastructure being dissected by industry's experts. You will agree with me that the theme of this edition reflects an important reality. While solar has transformed electricity access across the continent, you will agree with me that Africa's clean energy future must transition beyond solar to now become more diversified and more resilient. Our potential in biogas, wind, and small-scale hydropower offers this opportunity to strengthen energy security and accelerate sustainable development across the continent. But unlocking these opportunities takes more than having abundant resources. It goes into building a strong pipeline of investment-ready projects, and that's why EESII matters. We will move into the infra pitch session shortly. This session will feature project presentation by the group leads of the cohort 9 of the Development and Financing Infrastructure Project. During this session, the participants will gain invaluable insights from the industry's experts into their projects, which will shaping them in their journey to becoming successful project developers. Africa's infrastructure challenge cannot be solved by the government or the private sector alone. It demands a collaboration and a shared commitment towards projects that are commercially viable, socially impactful, and sustainable. Together, we can turn promising ideas into bankable projects and build infrastructure ecosystem that delivers a lasting prosperity. Thank you, and as we continue with the lineup of activities for this event, I wish you a productive and an impactful EESII 3.0. Thank you once again.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Destiny, for such warm remarks and also introducing the infra pitch. So I'd like to, go ahead and say, like, over the next 90 minutes, you're going to be hearing directly from participants in the DFIP cohort 9. They have spent the last 6 weeks researching, structuring, and sharpening the infrastructure projects they're about to bring to you. So we encourage you to lean in, react, and send emojis, and also question yourselves the way you would in any serious investment conversation, right? And also bring that same regard to what you're about to hear. Your feedback genuinely matters, and your perspective might exactly be what someone here who is developing a project needs to hear. Our distinguished jurors for this session are Mr. Shahid Ali, who is the head project preparation at Development Bank of Southern Africa, Mr. Femi Awofala, the founder of the African Catalyst, Mrs. Karen Njonkwe, project preparation professional, Mr. Ahmed Damsida, Chief Executive Officer at Energy Culture Limited, and Mr. Nafal Hassani Mohammed, Manager Project Preparation at African Export-Import Bank. Joining me in the studio is also Jacinda Efemina. She is a Senior Transaction Analyst at Brickstone Africa, and she worked closely with the developers you're about to see present projects on, how to basically structure and make sure it is best in the best position to be presented. So Jacinda, I'd like to ask you, are there insights to this presentation that you have that you would not like us to miss?
Okay, like you said, thank you very much. Like you said, these projects are real projects under the PIDA PAP2 framework, and participants had to take the stance of the project sponsor and refine the projects repeatedly using the Brickstone bankability framework. So that's one thing I do not want everyone to miss. The Brickstone bankability pillars, which are three: predictable cash flow, fixed construction and delivery, and governance and sustainability. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Jacinda. So you can go ahead now and introduce the
Okay, so
groups.
for the first session, we're going to have Group A, and taking us on this pitch is Victory Igwe. She will walk us through the project Lesotho Highland Water Project. This is one of Africa's flagship transboundary water infrastructure projects, which is developed jointly by Lesotho and South Africa. Phase 2 expands the existing scheme by increasing water transfer to South Africa while also supporting hydropower development and regional water security. Victory, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Victory, and I will be making this presentation with my partner Testimony. So we are here today for the Lesotho Highlands Water Project Phase 2. Through this presentation, we'll be walking you through the project description, through the project company, as well as the project bankability plan, and finally to our request for early stage funding. These are the team members for Group A, and we've worked on this project from the project description down to this point. Now, the project description. So why are we here today? We're here today because there's a problem, right, that needs a solution. So on one hand, there's a looming water crisis in South Africa, right? About 66% of South Africa's GDP, that's the population that is contributing to over 36% of the GDP, is experiencing a water problem in the Gauteng economic province, right? And this is affecting over 15 million people with a 24.9% dam capacity, right? And on the other hand, for the Kingdom of Lesotho, we see that it is a water-rich country but energy poor, right? We see that 70 plus megawatts of power is important for South Africa and Mozambique, right? So what is the solution that we are proposing through our project? Right. The Lesotho Highland Water Project is a binational water infrastructure program between Lesotho and South Africa that is designed to expand water infrastructure. So on one hand, we're solving the problem in South Africa by delivering water to them to meet the water demand, the rising water demand in South Africa. And on the other hand, we're development infrastructure in Lesotho and also helping them to leverage their natural resource, which is water, in developing a hydropower plant. So what will this project do? We're proposing that we construct a Pohali Dam, right, and that would involve a 38-kilometer transfer tunnel to increase the water delivery to South Africa from what it is currently, which is 480 metric cube meter to about 1,270 million metric cube meter capacity in a year. Aside from that, we'll be developing the Oxbow hydropower plant to generate clean energy for Lesotho and thus reducing the import and dependency, right? What are the demand drivers? Now, we've established that for South Africa, there is a demand. It's been projected that by 2030, there'll be a 17% water deficit in South Africa. Now, this water problem is affecting the Gauteng area in South Africa that has 5 provinces. These 5 provinces by themselves contribute to 60% of the country's GDP. This water is needed for both domestic use in the mining industry, the agriculture industry, right? So we see that there's an actual demand for the water in South Africa. On the other hand, we've also explained that Lesotho is importing a large chunk of its electricity, despite holding 50% of South Africa's catchment. Okay, so moving on to the policy and strategic objectives, right? So there's a context behind this project, right? For the continental and regional context, this project has been classified as a PID, Priority Action Plan. On the part of South Africa, this project is also a part of the Southern African National Development Plan as water infrastructure for Gauteng. And on the part of Lesotho, is a part of the Lesotho National Strategic Development Plan too. Now, the socio-economic objectives that we aim to gain from this project, first is employment creation. We've done the valuation for this project, and it's projected to provide employment to about 16,400 workers across both countries. There's revenue generation, there's enabling infrastructure for Lesotho, and across both countries, the beneficiaries across both countries will be about 8+ million citizens from both Lesotho and South Africa. There's going to be community resettlement plans, and there's the fact that this project is not just coming out of thin air. There's a phase 1 precedent which has already happened, which was completed in 2003 and was commissioned or inaugurated in 2004. So moving on to the legal and regulatory context, we would also have you know that there have been laws and treaties that have been signed by both countries to back up this project. First is the 1986 treaty, right, which is a bilateral treaty between the two countries and sets down the foundational framework for this project. It also supersedes any conflicting domestic laws on the phase 2 matters. We also have the National Water Act, the Water Act, the Environmental Act, and the Land Act of South Africa and Lesotho. Now, we understand that this regulatory context does not take the place of approvals in these two countries. And in order to prevent any clog in the wheel of this project when it gets started, we also outline all the relevant regulatory approvals that we need for this project to kickstart. Now, going on to the project mapping, we can see on the stage that Lesotho is surrounded by South Africa. Now, the location for the dam would be in Mokloton, where we would have the core dam and terminal infrastructure. And then we would also have the Oxbow hydropower plant that is generating 80.3 megawatts of hydropower, right? We'll also have the Katse Dam, the Val Dam, and then Joburg, which is going to be the primary water beneficiary. Now, all of the logistics will be happening in Maseru, Lesotho. This is the project company and the management team, that is project team EESII for this project. Now we can see that from the CEO to the CFO, we have, comparatively, we have a success. Now, what are the key project details? The Pohali Dam height is projected to be 165 meters concrete-faced rockfill with a reservoir storage capacity of 2,325 metric capacity. So we're projecting an annual water delivery of 490 metric cube per year to increase to 1,270, right? So we can see that our total construction cost is $2,735 million with 30% equity and 70% debt. The construction period for this project is 6 years and the total operation period will be 25 years. So the sizing rationale. Now, why is this project? Why have we projected this? Why have we made this project to be this size? First is the fact that there's a confirmed market demand. Second is the fact that there's hydrological availability. There's the fact that there's a treaty obligation between the two countries, and then there's funding availability. Right now, going on to the stakeholders for this project. Considering this project is a public-private partnership. On the left-hand side, we have the government of the Republic of Lesotho and the government of the the government of Lesotho and the government of South Africa, right? We also have the Lesotho Highland Water Commission and the Development Authority, as well as the other bodies that we can see, the public bodies that we're going to be partnering with. Now, on the private part, it is EESII, which is us, the project sponsors, the lead project sponsors, and we also have other co-sponsors with us. Now, we're working with financial institutions such as the African Development Bank, which also contributed to the phase 1 of the project, and then the African Finance Corporation, the Development Bank of South Africa, and the World Bank. Now, we also have third-party participants, which are the off-takers. The off-take has been the government of South Africa taking on the water that we are providing, as well as the other third parties that we can see on the screen. Now, this is like a snapshot of the transaction grid. We have the project sponsors on the left hand, coming together to work with other sponsors, and then we are incorporating a special purpose vehicle. Now, this special purpose vehicle will be entering into the relevant agreements with the EPC contractors for both the hydropower plants and for the water projects. We're also going to be entering into O&M agreements and power purchase agreements as offtake agreements for both the power and the water. Now, going down to the risk. in as much as we believe that this project is very bankable, we've been able to identify some risks, that you may also be worried about, and we've laid out all of the mitigating approach that we have for this risk. With regards to the market demand risk, we've entered into take or pay water agreements with the government of South Africa, as well as minimum purchase commitments. This also spirals down to the price risk, which we have mitigated against through inflation and FX indexation and periodic tariff reviews. Now, going into the political and regulatory risk, we've gotten the relevant permits and licensing that may cause delays, and as well as we've dealt with the land acquisition and resettlement risks. Now, going on to macroeconomic risk, currency and inflation risk, we've been able to blend local and hard currency financing, providing FX hedging where feasible, and index EPC price adjustments. Then for force majeure risk, we've also handled the environmental and social approval risk, such as the natural hazard event risk. Now, going on to the sponsor risk mitigation. Out of all of the risks that we identified before, we realized that there are some risks that are more apparent than others, and we have developed a mechanism through which we could share this risk with the government. Now, such risks are the construction overruns, the offtake payments, the political and regulatory risk, as well as currency repatriation. We can see that for the construction overruns, we have sovereign guarantee backs up from the government of South Africa. For the offtake payments, we also have sovereign guarantee backs from the government of Lesotho. Now, we're going to move on to the second part of the presentation, which is the pillars of bankability. I'm going to be handing over to my partner right now to walk us through that. Thank you.
To continue this presentation, I'll be walking us through the three pillars of bankability. First one, the predictable cash flows, construction, delivery, and operations, and governance and sustainability. So to the first pillar, which is predictable cash flow. So we understand the fact that the foundation of every bankable project is cash flow predictability, as this ensures that the debt service requirements for the operational period is actually met. And one way we've ensured that cash flow for this project is predictable is first, the treaty-backed water offtake obligation with South Africa, of which South Africa is obligated to purchase the water and also pay royalties to Lesotho according to the terms stipulated in the 1986 treaty and the 2011 Phase 2 agreement. Also, for the hydropower part of the project, we have a long-term power purchase offtake agreement with the Lesotho Electricity Company, ESCOM, and the government of Lesotho for a 20-year period, which is also in line with the debt tenure of the project. For the tariff structure of this project, we structured the water tariff in such a way that as the volume of water delivery increases to South Africa per year, the water tariff also increases and is expected to grow at a rate of 2% annually. The power tariff is also CPI or inflation index, such as inflation increases, the power tariff also increases. Now to the second pillar, which is construction, delivery, and operations. So we have a fixed price EPC contract with both the water EPC contractor and the power EPC contractor, with also liquidated damages in order to cater for any underperformance or late delivery in terms of the agreement on the project, and also a 10% performance bond. Also, we've given the lenders a privilege to have an independent engineer that would be able to verify the quality and the delivery of the project to ensure that every milestone is actually in line with what is stipulated in the project scope before allowing any drawdown of funds. Also, we have LHDA, Lesotho Island Development Authority, as the operator, of which LHDA was the operator for phase 1 of this project, which has been in operations for over 25 years. And we believe that with the expertise and knowledge they have in operating Katsay Dam of phase 1 for the past 25 years, they'll be a good fit for operating the phase 2 of this project, which includes the Oxbow, the Polyali Dam, and the Oxbow hydropower. Now to the third pillar, governance and sustainability. So we understand that this is a very key criteria when it comes to seeking funds from multilateral lenders, of which we have multilateral lenders as part of the lenders for this project, as they don't only look into the financial returns, but they also look into the aspect of the sustainability of a project in terms of affecting future generations. So the first thing is that the environmental social impact assessment for this project has been completed, and our environmental management plans has been done in such a way that is in line with Equator principles and the HADES IFC performance standards and also the AFDB performance standards. For community engagement, so over 91% of the workers to be involved in this project are from Basotho, which is a place in Lesotho, right? And we are going to be making use of the grievance redress mechanism that was put in place in phase 1 for this project. Also, in order to ensure structure in terms of governance and transparency, we are going to be having an independent board of directors to provide accountability, and also an audit committee to review the annual financial and operational report of LSWC. So every stakeholder is kept on board in terms of the returns and how the project goes. Next, the project finance roadmap. This is our timeline to achieve financial close. By year 1 Q3, we hope to have signed all memorandum of understanding with the private sponsors and the project counterparties. By year 2 Q3, we projected to achieve commercial close in terms of predictable cash flows and also construction, delivery, and operation. So what I mean by that is the fact that the aspect of the water purchase agreements with South Africa, which is the off-taker, and also the power purchase agreements with our 3 off-takers for power, we're going to ensure that the documentations for that are actually in place. And for construction, delivery, and operations, after the international competitive tendering process, we're going to select an EPC contractor for the water project and also for the power project. So by year 3 of Q1, would close out on governance and sustainability in terms of EESII reports and the record of decisions to be granted in line with Equator principles and IFC performance standards. By year 3 Q4, would close out on equity with respect to the equity agreement and the shareholders agreement among our 5 equity sponsors. And by year 4 Q3, we're going to be closing out on debt with the 4 multilateral lenders and achieve financial close. And by year 4 Q4, there will be drawdown and mobilization for construction to commence. All right, so these are highlights of key documentations required for this project, and I'll just run through these. This includes the water purchase agreements, power purchase agreements, shareholders agreements for the equity sponsors, SHGC consortium agreements, operations and maintenance agreements with the Lesotho Island Development Authority, which is our operator with over 25 years of experience in operating such projects. Next, the key credit enhancements for these projects. First is the Government of South Africa Sovereign Guarantee, which is meant to back up the water revenue from South Africa in order to avoid default risks. Also, we have the Government of Lesotho Sovereign Guarantee, which is meant to back up the power revenue also in order to also avoid default risks when it comes to Lesotho Electricity Company as the off-taker for power and the government of Lesotho. Also, we're going to be having a debt service reserve account in order to ensure that debts are paid as at when due. Then we are going to be having a political risk insurance with RTD. And EPC security package in terms of the 10% performance board and liquidated damages with the selected EPC contractor after the international competitive tendering process. Then also the phase 1 track record, which has been in operations for 25 years, is also a good thing to note. Next, to our project costs and capital expenditure. So we have 6 components for this project. Basically, our project cost, we've been able to streamline it into 6 components, of which main works is taking about 40% of the project cost. And our project cost is a total sum of $2,732.4 million US, cut across preliminaries, main works, key equipment, other assets, electrical, mechanical, and supervision, and also a contingency of 8% in case of inflation, exchange rates, or anything that might happen. All right, for our capital structure in terms of how do we source the funds for the project cost. So we have a 30% equity, and a 70% debt from senior lenders. And our equity sponsors are majorly 5 equity sponsors. Then they're going to be bringing a total sum of about $819.7 million US. And our lenders will be bringing a total of $1,912.7 million US from African Development Bank, African Finance Corporation, World Bank, and Development Bank of South Africa. All right, so these are the high-level financing highlights from our model. For the revenue drivers of water, our average water tariff is $0.97 per meter cube, and the capacity of the Polyali Dam is about 2,325 million cubic meters. For the power, our energy tariff is about $50 per megawatts per hour, and we've estimated, because it's a peaking facility, we've estimated that it will be operating at 8 hours per day. For capacity utilization, year 1 to year 2, we're going to be making use of 75%, year 3 to 5, 85%, and year 6 to 25, 95%. On the left-hand side, you can see a graph that shows the trend of our revenue, EBITDA, and net income from year 1 to year 25, which has been broken down with an interval of 5 years. All right, so still speaking on the high-level financing highlights from the model, we have our EBITDA versus net profit margin trend across year 1 to year 25, of which, as at year 1 of operations, our EBITDA is about 70.6%, and down to year 25. Also, as at year 1, our net income margin is about 44.1%. The cash flow available for debt service in year 1 starts from $782 million US, and it goes way up to about 2,089.1 million US by year 25. For the output of this project, our IRR is about 17.2%, ROE is about 27.8%, and the cumulative free cash flow across the 25-year operational period is about 34.3 billion US dollars. The DSCR of our project is a minimum of 4.17 times, which is 3 times above the target set by the lenders of 1.5 times. Our all-in debt rate was gotten from the standard overnight financing rate of about 4.5% and a 250% basis margin, which is bringing it up to about 7.6%. The tenure of the debt is 20 years with a 7-year grace period and a 5-year tax holiday. All right, so after the aspect of showing you our model and in terms of the output. So in terms of the pre-development activities in order to get financial close, this is what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months. First is to incorporate LSWC, which is our ring-fenced SPV, as a separate legal entity. Next, we're going to be signing memorandum of understanding with the government of Lesotho and also South Africa. Next, we're going to be launching a competitive tender for selecting the water EPC contractor and the power EPC contractor. Next, we're going to be appointing the legal counsel, as we understand that paying attention to regulatory authorities and also legal frameworks is very important when it comes to cross-boundary projects across 2 countries. We want to ensure that we're taking into consideration our regulatory framework regarding Lesotho and also South Africa. So we need the expertise of a legal person on board. Next, we are going to be ensuring we sign the water purchase agreement and the power purchase agreements with ESCOM, LEC, and government of Lesotho. Next, we are going to be having an independent technical review of the existing feasibility studies and the EESII report that has been completed to ensure that they're actually up to date with what we have as at today. Also, we're going to the financial model. We're going to be updating the preliminary financial model to show sensitivity analysis and also incorporate the lender terms in the model. And next, we're going to be engaging the lenders, share project concept notes, and also bringing pre-mandate discussions with the 4 lenders. The grievance redress scheme, which I mentioned earlier, that was implemented in phase 1, we're going to be updating it in accordance to the AFDB redress mechanism also. And lastly, we're going to be appointing a TD in order to ensure the project against any political risk. Since the project is across 2 countries, there could be some political risk, so we need to ensure that we cover that risk or take note of that risk. All right, for the pre-development activities that I mentioned earlier, this is an estimate of the cost required to cover those pre-development activities, and it's passed across legal and transaction advisory, technical ESG and independent studies in terms of EESII engineering validation, also financial and commercial advisory, because we need the financial model to be updated with sensitivity analysis and scenario analysis, information memorandum, basically the data room, then project management and engagement in terms of investor presentations, governance documentation. So the total sum of the pre-development activities would cost about $4.2 million in order to complete the pre-development capital allocation activities in order to reach financial close. And for the pre-development activities, which I stated earlier, that is going to cost about $4.2 million. We've already projected how we are going to source for these funds in terms of allocating 62% from equity sponsors, 62% from equity sponsors, 24% from AFDB project preparation facility grants, and 14% from World Bank project facility grant also, in order to source for the total amount of $4.2 million required for the pre-development activities over the next 6 months. And finally, we are making a request and seeking for a total development equity of $4.2 million in order to get this project to financial close. And in terms of a value proposition on why you should invest in this project now, as I stated earlier, project has an IRR of 17.2%, an ROE of 27.8%, which is above the benchmark, and a minimum DSCR of 4.1 times, which is 3 times above the target set by the lenders of 1.5 times. Also, this project is backed by a 40-year bilateral treaty, and as a completed phase 1 that's been operational for over 25 years. Also, we have, from the projections, we have about $34.3 billion cumulative cash flow over the 25-year operational period. And this project is also going to benefit about 8 million people, that is in terms of the nationals of Lesotho, and also it also aligns to SDG 6, SDG 7, and SDG 4. So we believe that these are strong reasons why you should invest in this project. Also, in terms of our request for seed funding, development equity in order to get this project to financial close, if we get this funding, it will help us to unlock the 30% core equity needed for the project cost, and also the senior debts of $1,912.7 million for debt also, which contributes also to the project cost of about $2,732.4 million. And once we get this seed equity, these are the next steps that we're going to be doing. As you can see below, just to reiterate, we're going to incorporate the LSWPC launch and advisor tender, execute the water purchase agreement and the power purchase agreement, financial model audits to incorporate sensitivity analysis, and lender due diligence initiation, and also setting up the data room required for the project. So we are seeking $4.2 million seed equity in order to get this project to financial close. And we strongly believe that with the work that has been done on ground, this is a bankable project for any serious investor concerned about financial returns, impact, and also sustainability. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, testimony, for the presentation. I'd like to spotlight the jurors for comments and feedback. Does anyone have a feedback or comments? You can just unmute your mic and speak.
Thank you, Shahid from the DBSA. So apologies, I couldn't follow all the slides. They weren't very readable. But I'm going to go on what you said, a couple of comments maybe. So one, very well done. Thank you very much for the presentation. Well presented. I mean, the key components well addressed as well. So let me ask the team. So climate change is real. So what happens if the rainfall pattern changes? And I want you to just maybe give me a view on how it impacts your project. And two, just in terms of your financing, you're asking the financiers to take a view on two governments under bilateral agreement. You've mentioned PRI as cover. Interesting. In the event that you have, one is just getting PRI cover in an instant where it's a bilateral agreement. Maybe a comment on that. In the event that you don't get, so you're banking the cash flows as you explained, but you also it's backed by sovereign guarantees. To the extent you don't get payment from either of the governments, where does it leave you as a project? Thank you.
All right. So speaking on the, I think the second question. So in a scenario when we don't have a sovereign guarantee from the government as in that to cater for default risks, we also have a debt service reserve account, a 6 month of debt service reserve account, and we believe that with the cash flows kept in that reserve account, in situations whereby the revenue gotten from each year from the project is not sufficient to meet up with our debt obligations, we'll fall back to the debt service reserve account for cash flows.
Thank you. Maybe it's a point to note. If you're going to government guarantees, you would have gone through your reserve account. But well done. Thank you very much. It's been a great presentation.
This is Nafar from Afrexim Bank. I concur with Shahid. This was a very good presentation. And just have some couple of points. I think you cover a key aspect related to how this kind of project has to be essentially structured and mitigated from a risk perspective. I think what remains a bit open to actually add on what Shahid has said is the issue of off-take risk. The sovereign guarantee is very, very good. It's also important to have gives real comfort regarding the commitment of the two countries towards the project. But I think from a risk or an off-take risk perspective, while the sovereign guarantee can essentially be mitigating the solvency risk, very important to look at some additional instruments that are going to mitigate the liquidity risk related to the off-take payment risk. So the debt service reserve account is one that you mentioned, but you may also want to try to get some sort of standard letter of credit that are going to be essentially issued in favor of the project, and they can be embedded into the power purchase agreement to enhance the service reserve account. And that mechanism has to be replenishable so that if for three months or 6 months there is no payment, you can draw on that instrument, be able to service your debt, and after the first withdrawal, you should be able to also replenish so that if it occurs once again, you can still be able to leverage on that same instrument. So that help in terms of adding more liquidity into the project in a situation where the revenue are not sufficient to cover your debt service without having to go straight to the government guarantee, which is actually the last resort that you are going to. I think that's the first point. In addition to this, I think there are two key issues that we need to look at. I wasn't too clear to have understood what is the currency that the currency of denomination of the power purchase agreement and the backwater agreements. So if it's going to be in rand or a local currency, I still see that the FX risk is still open. I think the presenters have mentioned that there is a blend mix between local currency and hard currency to mitigate the EPC cost, which is denominated in hard currency, which is good. But you also need to look at the other side, on the revenue side, if the revenue are also matching with the currency of domination of the senior debt facility that you are going to get. So again, if it's in those two agreements are going to be denominated in US dollar, and the tariff that you stated is in US dollar, that should be perfect because it's going to be a natural hedge. If not, then we'll have to see what are sort of FX mitigation instrument that you can put in place to mitigate that. I also wanted to comment on the completion risk. I think the structure that you have adopted by having a turnkey EPC contract is excellent, and I think you mentioned some of the key provisions that you need to embed in those type of contract. Mentioned liquidity damage, performance bond. I think that's all great. We may also want to consider that the EPCs will also provide some sort of corporate guarantee from the parent company to further solidify this aspect. But the key issue that we have here is the fact that you have two main components of this project, the water component and the power component. And you stated that you want to have two EPC contractors that will be responsible for the two components. So, two things. Either, and first, let me start by the issue here. We may have issues whereby if there is a delay or there is any major challenge during the completion, one of the EPC will say it is not their responsibility, it's not their fault, and they will point towards the other party, which is the other EPC contract. So by having these two, we are deviating for the single point of responsibility, which is also important and key in project finance. So ideally, you may want to have one main EPC contractor that can subcontract to other parties to be responsible for the other component, the two components of the project, but ultimately the responsibility to deliver the project on time and within budget relies with one single EPC contractor. I think that's the best way from a completion risk perspective, but of course it would have some cost implication. Alternatively, if you want to consider having these two EPC contractors, you have to work on a very robust interface agreement between the two. Interface agreement that would essentially outline the responsibility and allocate the various risks to the various the two EPC contractor to ensure that you know exactly who is responsible for what, and that is to avoid any conflict during the completion phase of the project. I think those are a couple of other things, but to make it short, I just wanted to focus on these 2 points. Thank you, but otherwise it was a great presentation.
All right. I was saying those are very excellent observations, and we're very grateful for the feedback. We just wanted to add a bit of context as to why we decided to have two different EPC contractors, and it's simply for the reason of specialty, right? To separate the operations of the two outputs, right? And we have mitigated against the construction delay for these two EPC contractors by going into an O&M agreement. So the O&M partner would be responsible for managing the construction for both EPC contractors, such that there's not going to be a lot of blowback with regards to delay from either of the EPC contractors. And we believe that the O&M contract is going to help with ensuring that we don't have to deal with any construction risk. Now, going back to the the sovereign guarantee. Thank you for your comments on the debt service reserve account. An extra layer of protection that we also provided for is the fact that there is a treaty-backed offtake agreement. So we believe that this is also like an extra layer of protection that we can rely on if the government guarantees do not come through. So thank you very much.
All right. Also, to add to that, in respect to the fact that you highlighted the exchange rates risks with respect to the USD and the rand. So to curb that, we're going to ensure that we hedge we have an hedging mechanism in terms of probably entering a forward contract, a future contract, or a swap contract, such that we are not exposed to so much loss when it comes to foreign exchange risks.
I think you should clarify, and if you have, again, I say I missed quite a bit of the presentation, so it's just how the SPV will work with the PIE, which is already in place, to avoid duplication. And there are some contracts that have already been signed, so just to understand how that would work. But most importantly, I didn't get a lot from you're going to be doing the phase 2 of the project. What were the lessons learned from phase 1 and how those have been applied to phase 2 of this project? You see a number of things, your time to financial close, economic returns. Those are all the things. I don't feel like I got it for something you're doing a phase 2 of. I think it's important to have a section on lessons learned. So if they were addressed again, my apologies, but I don't remember saying that.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for that. So, Ref, to your first question in terms of how the SPV works with the regulatory authorities. So, the SPV is going to be a separate legal entity, and as you said, rightly said, some documents have been signed in terms of EESII, the treaty-backed offtake agreement also, and the phase 2 agreement of 2011 between government of Lesotho and the government of South Africa. So the way it was structured is that from phase 1, we have the Lesotho Island Development Authority representing the government of Lesotho, and we have the TCTA representing the government of South Africa as bodies in this project. And the Lesotho Highland Water Commission is the regulatory authority that both governments has agreed on to be like the superior authority over this project. So we have those regulatory authorities that the SPV is going to be like reporting to and giving updates respect to the project.
Yeah, and to further add to that, I think it's very interesting to make reference to the fact that there was a phase 1 of the project. Now, a very smart way that we've incorporated phase 1 with phase 2 is that all of the documents that we have signed have continuity provisions from phase 1, right? So regardless of the contractors that we are working with, because we have a couple of new parties in this phase 2 that were not in the phase 1, such as our EPC contractors and our O&M contractors. Whatever legal documentation that has been entered into from the setting up of the SPV to the third-party agreement all have continuity provisions from phase 1. Now, going on to the lessons that we have learned from phase 1, I think that largely phase 1 sets out the foundation for the project, in the sense that, first of all, it lets us understand that the project is bankable. So phase 1 was more or less like a trial to see how the project is going to work between the two countries. And then going from phase 1, we have seen that we can actually expand this project. So the lessons that we got from phase 1, it sort of informed our project timeline. It allowed us to be realistic with our output in terms of the water output and in terms of the power output. We've also learned that there are certain parties that are dependable to work with. For instance, one of the lenders for phase 1 was African Development Bank, and it has also set out some sort of credibility for the project, and we can use the success stories from phase 1 to raise funds for phase 2.
And also to add to that, one of the lessons we paid in terms of selecting an O&M operator, which is the Lesotho Island Development Authority, was because we saw that they successfully operated the Katsi Dam of phase 1 for over 25 years. So we just thought with the experience, the knowledge, and the expertise they've gotten from operating phase 1, they'll be the right operator to have for the phase 2 of this project.
Okay, I think we can't take any more questions because of our time. So I'm so sorry, Mr. Ahmed. We have to move to the next group, but thank you very much, Group A. Well done for your hard work. So we'll move to the next group now. Thank you. So we're going to move to Group B. Their project is LAPSET Crude Oil Pipeline Project. The crude oil pipeline forms part of the broader LAPSET corridor program, and it's designed to transport crude oil across the region while strengthening energy infrastructure, regional trade, and economic integration between Kenya and its neighboring countries. Representing Group B is Itunu Adewole. Over to you, Itunu.
Yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Itunu Adewole, and I'll be representing Group 2. And the title of our project is LAPSET Crude Oil Pipeline Project. So, moving on. The project team members are displayed below. Then moving on to the table of contents. Under the table of contents, we have the project descriptions, project context, project locations, all the way to the request to early stage funding. So moving to the project descriptions, why are we building this project? So we discovered that for Kenya and South Sudan, there is a problem of how they can commercialize the crude oil. These countries are richly blessed with crude oil, but they were unable to commercialize it. So more or less like a resources stranded by missing infrastructure. So we dedicated 821 kilometer heated pipeline to scale the export volume. And the project scope is going to cover the Lokicha to Lamu truck line, phase 1, and the South Sudan feeder line. So moving to the project context, we believe that a project of this magnitude has to align with the policy in the country, as well as the socio-economic value and regulatory compliance. So under the policy integration, this project is in alignment with the Kenya Vision 2030 and also with the African Union Agenda 2063 framework. So moving to the socio-economic value, believe that this project is going to drive local job creations across 6 transits of the country, as well as the regulatory compliance. There's a strict adherence to Problem Act 2019, as well as the International IFC Performance Standard. So what are the opportunities created and the impact of the project on SDGs? So on the opportunity created by the project, we have the economic opportunity, job creations, like I mentioned earlier, and also infrastructure opportunity. Then we have social opportunity as well. Then for the impact on the impact of the project on the SDG, we have decent work and economic growth, which is strengthening the SDG 8. We have industry innovation and infrastructure, strengthening the SDG 9, reduce inequality, strengthening SDG 10, all the way to SDG 17. So now moving on to the project locations. So why are we specifically choosing these parts? So number one is the government has actually set aside about 500 right of way, which we are trying to leverage on. And this project location is going to be along the Kenya Turkana oil field to Lamu DC port. Also on the project locations, we consider some factors before we can because we can decide on this location, which is number one, the strategic positions. We have demand drivers, land competitiveness, accessibility, sustainability, which is something really important now, then the policy support. So moving on to the project companies, we are Bellic Infrastructure Consortium. We are a Pan-African Infrastructure Development and Investment Group focused on energy, transport, and midstream oil and gas infrastructure across Africa. So we are the lead sponsor of this project, as well as the promoter of the LAPSET crude oil pipeline project. And also we serve as the equity investors that structure this Kenya South Sudan Crude Corridor Companies Limited, which is the SPV for this project. So our role in this project involved lead sponsors and promoter, driving project structuring and development to financial investment decision, as well as we are equity investors, which we have some other co-investors like NIPET, KPC, AFDB, Government of Kenya, and Government of South Sudan as well. Also, we are coordinating host governments, lenders, and offtake negotiation on behalf of the SPV. Then also we oversee corporate governance and community engagement standard across the SPV. So Bellic Consortium, we are giving a 30% lead sponsor equity stakes to this SPV. Out of the 100% of the equity stakes, we have decided to give about 30% of these equity stakes. So our strength is we have a proven track record in structuring large-scale infrastructure like this. We have a deep knowledge of Kenya and South Sudan energy and midstream sector. So we have the deep knowledge of this region, as well as we have a strong relationship with the global DFIs, Export Credit Agency, as well as the multilateral lenders. We also we have a strong delivery capacity aligned with IFC standard and Equator principle. And these are the leadership in the team. The person of Blessing Olajide, Itunu Adewale, Ayobami, Olulano, Abdullah. So moving on to the project facility sizing. So this is one of the factors that will determine how big or how we are sizing the project itself. So we consider the productions about 250 to 300 barrels per day, and this is actually influencing the way this project is going to be structured. So we have the sizing rationales and the competitive edge. We consider the multiple source demand. South Sudan is giving about 150 to 180,000 barrels per day, while Kenya Lokicha is giving about 60 to 80,000 barrels per day, plus 40 to 60 barrels reserved for future volume. We have a reserve of about 885 million barrels, and this is actually showing that this project can be of a long term in the next 10 to 20 years. So we have the supply logistics, which can further design in a way to suit the off-takers. Also, the graph here is showing the compositions of how the barrel is being distributed. Then we did a regional benchmark with East African crude oil pipeline, which produced about 216 to 246,000 barrels per day. But the project we are building at the optimum capacity is going to be producing about 300,000 barrels per day. So still on the project facility sizing, we are trying to justify this on both the resources and technical assessment and the economic and financial viability. For the resources and technical assessment, we understand that there is about 750 million barrels of crude oil that can be produced, and this is actually showing that there's a resources that need to be commercialized. So also we have the production profile, we have the crude quality and O&M infrastructure. So on the crude quality, we understand that the kind of crude oil that we have in Kenya need about 60 to 80 degrees Celsius in order for the project to move properly. So we are putting those things in place by the time we are structuring the facility. Then on the economic and financial viability, the right sizing. I mentioned earlier that the government already created about 500 meters that right of way, and this is one of the place that is going to be leveraged on, because we consider that Lapset's crude oil pipeline is not only the infrastructure project that is going to pass across that region. There's also railway projects. We have different large infrastructure deals. So we are considering 20 to 24 inches line built for about 250 barrels of optimum capacity. Then we have market and off-takers, then financing. Moving to the project stakeholders, we understand that this project is going to have numerous stakeholders, and we have categorized them into six parts. We have the government authority, which have the government of Kenya, government of South Sudan. We have the project developers and equity sponsor. We have the BELIC infrastructure consortiums, African development banks, government of Kenya and South Sudan. We have the debtor sponsor, engineering and construction, customers and shippers, then the community. So this is the project transaction grid. BELIC infrastructure consortium. We are structuring an SPV, which is titled Kenya South Sudan Corridor Crude Corridor Companies Limited, KSSC. So we are the ones structuring this deal. And on the left-hand side here, we have the equity sponsors, which BELIC is taking 30%, NIPET is providing 50% of 100%, and KPC is producing 15% as well, AFDB 10%, government in Kenya and government of South Sudan are going to be providing 50% respectively. So moving on to the debt sponsor, we want to leverage more on the Export Credit Agency due to the fact that we can easily get a low interest rate from them. And also we are considering multilateral development banks as well as commercial banks. So we understand the magnitude of this project, and we know that there is a need for offtake agreements. So we've established some offtake agreements across GNOPC, PDOC, SPOC, South Lokicha Development, We also have EPC contractor, which is Hydro, and we understand the fact that we can actually use 2 EPC contractor, but because of the risks of delay in construction, we have to stick with one. We critically look into the expertise to stick with Hydro. Then also we have some insurance guarantees in place, because we understand that there's a high possibility for political risk, and we want to look for a way to mitigate it. So moving on to the risk mapping, we understand that the fact that there's an objective to be achieved, definitely there's going to be risks attached to it. And we have, we have categorized these risks into 6 major parts. We have the commercial risks, financial risks, legal risks, force majeure, sponsor, and political. All of these risks has been, mitigated as low as reasonably practicable. So this risk has actually been allocated to the best stakeholders that can handle them. And under the risk map here, we categorize it into both impact and likelihood. Some risks have high impact and low likelihood, and we have actually looked for a way to mitigate all of these risks. So moving to the approach to bankability, we are building our bankability on 3 major tenants, which is predictable cash flow, fixed construction, delivery, and operation approach, governance, and sustainability. So under the predictable cash flow, we have a long-term ship or pay with local producer with a firm minimum volume. So what we did here is that we have an uptake agreement with some companies, and we understand that regardless of what they are transporting, we have a minimum volume. So even if they are transporting below the minimum volume, they will still pay the minimum amount. And I believe that by that we are hedging against the risks of cash flow volatility. So we also make sure that we charge in dollars, and we are charging $10 per barrel, which is indexed for inflation and FX. So we are charging in dollars, and I believe that is going to hedge against any kind of foreign exchange risk. And also the way we index the inflation, so that the current market value of that $10 will still be preserved. Even if there is inflation, by 5%, our price also will increase by 5%. So by that, we are hedging against the inflation. So moving to the government throughputs or deficiency uptaking. So we have an agreement with the government. Should in case there is a shortfall in the production, government can also come in as a guarantor to close the gap. So moving on to the fixed constructions and delivery. So we have a fixed price, date certain turnkey EPC with liquidated damages and retention bond. So we already appointed Hydro as the EPC contractor, and we put in place liquidated damages should in case they cannot deliver as at the agreed times, and also retention bond, which we are kind of keeping about like 5% of the project costs before until the project is being delivered. Then we have completion guarantee, equity first, letter of credit backed. Then we have 10% contingency plus owner reserve. For 10%, we believe that despite the fact that we factor in all of the possible risk, so we understand that there are some uncertainties that might want to occur in the course of the building the project. So we have a 10% to undo that. So moving on to the governance and sustainability, we understand that the government have actually moved beyond profitability now. I mean, things should be done in a way that is not causing the effect to the environment and also is not affecting the next generation. So on the governance part, we ring fence these projects by creating an SPV, and we appoint independent board so that the decision will not be impaired. Also, we have shareholders agreement. We have independent procurement, anti-bribery, know your customers, and money laundering. So we understand the fact that we are sourcing from international organizations, and we know that these are the things that they are going to look into. We want to counter any form of terrorist financing, anti-money laundering, and anything that has to do with bribery. So we are putting all those things in place so that this will not impair our project. We also include environmental social impact assessments. We submit a letter of environmental social appointment to NEMA, and also resettlement action plan to IFC PS5. So basically what this is trying to do is that we understand that the fact that this project is taking about 820 kilometers, there is a high possibility that it might spin to a resettlement environment. So we want to see a way that we can, make plans for them in order not to disrupt the project. So moving to the project finance roadmap, we have the originations, we have the early development, pre-financing, financing, and post-financing. So for the origination, we are taking 2 quarters, quarter 1 and quarter 2. For early development, we are taking quarter 2 and quarter 3. and for pre-financing from Q4 of the first year to the third quarter of the second year. For the financing, we are taking the fourth quarter of the second year to the second quarter of the third year, and the post-financing close, we are taking it from the third quarter of the third year to fourth quarter of the third year. And also, we understand that different agreements will be signed, like common terms agreement, individual loan facility, amendment and waivers, equity sponsor agreements, account agreements, and intercreditor agreements. So we have the key credit enhancer, completion and performance bond. This is going to edge against the delay from the EPC contractor. We have letter of credit. We have interest rate edge. We edge against. We have partial risk guarantee and political risk guarantee using MEGA. Then the project cost and assumed capital structure. So we are structuring these projects by using 70% of the project cost is going to come from debt, while 30% is going to come from equity. So, and this is displayed like this. For the equity, we are going to be considering developing equities, shareholders loans, and core equities. For the debt, we are going to be looking at local banks for juniors, international lenders, DFI debt, and the total cost is 1.43 billion. So moving to the project financial highlights, we have the internal rate of return of about 26.5% and the return on equity of 57.01%. Also, from the debt service ratio, the minimum debt service ratio is 3.52x, which is way above the industry benchmark of 1.55x. So also the CapEx breakdown goes like this. You have the preliminary stage, we have the main work, key equipment, other key assets, electrical and mechanical, supervisor and contingency. So we show the graph showing our EBITDA and net income. So our EBITDA and net income both have a steady growth. For EBITDA, increased from $504 million to about $1.2 billion within 10 years. Then net income moved from 365 to $793 million. And this is reflecting the throughput and improving the operational efficiency of the pipeline. We also consider the cash available for debt service and net cash flow after debt service. So moving on to the investment value propositions, the pre-seed development equity cost breakdown. So the first one is land and geotechnical and right of way, which is going to take about 4 months, and we estimated about $400,000 for that. We have feasibility and preliminary engineering, environmental and social impact assessment, geotechnical, topographic survey, legal structuring, concessioning, and negotiations. We have the financial advisory, fundraising. We have the procurement and EPC tendering support, and we have the project management and admin. So for the competitive tender process for consultant procurement. So the procurement for consultants and advisors will be conducted through a structured and transparent and competitive tender process, which is undergoing this process. Preparation of the terms of reference, market sounding and log listing, request for qualifications, RFP, request for proposal, evaluation and selections, and contract award and negotiations. So this lapsed crude oil pipeline project requests early stage pre-seed funding of $3 million in exchange for equity. So pre-seed of $3 million in development equity is going to feed into our core equity of $426 million and also help us to unlock the senior debt financing of $1.01 billion. Also, we create some exit strategies for some investors that might want to pull out because we want to make everything flexible, which I will come back to that. So why should invest in this project? This project is giving about 26.50 return on internal rate of returns and return on equity of 57.01% with 3.52 minimum DSCR ratio. So we believe that this project, this fund will help us, is going to cause a catalytic effect. And this 3 million seed capital will help us to de-risk the project enough to be able to, attract some other lenders. I mean, the 70% from the senior debt and the 30% equity structure, which is behind the 1.43 billion. Also, it's going to have an impact is going to have an socio-economic impact, which is going to provide about 5,000 to 7,000 jobs across constructions and strengthening Kenya to South Sudan regional integrations. Also, as long as we are getting this fund, we are launching into origination work stream and also begin the competitive tender for advisors and initiate the predictable cash flow governance, sustainability, and structuring parallel. So we created exit strategy. So for any investor that wants to exist, maybe in the next 2 to 4 years, we tend to have an agreement with some infrastructure funds to be able to take that investment, maybe about maybe 10 to 15% discount. Also, we are trying to refinancing. We want to do a refinancing driven exit. So by bringing in a long-term debt or equity provider to buy the seed investors. So we are requesting for 3 million in order to start this project, and we definitely have the numbers and the returns to solidify this project, and we'll appreciate if we can get this funding from our investors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Group B. Thank you very much, Itunu. I'll just pass the mic over to the jurors. Do you have any question or comments on this presentation?
Come out from are not yours. So there is something called the volumetric risk. The volumetric risk is the well where the crude oil is located, meaning the crude oil reserves are, would encounter hindrances at any point due to geological inefficiencies and reduced flow by way of volume. That would now create a problem. I know you might think that your take or pay condition is a mitigation, but don't forget the other guy is in business. By the time the crude oil again, he would declare force majeure. So one way to
Okay. But if there are other questions from the other jurors, you can go ahead while we're waiting for Mr. Ahmed. Are there any questions or comments from the other jurors?
I think, sorry, I'm always unsure whether we are online or not. I think I would proceed with maybe after I review, because of the interruptions, it's been a bit hard to follow on my end. So I'm thinking I don't want to ask any questions that might not be appropriate for this project, because I think for me, one of the things I wanted to ask was how credible the production assumptions are. How did you get, how you got those figures? But I think what I need is to, get the presentation and sit down with it and then provide some comments that they can move forward with later.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Do you want to address the question or?
Yes.
Okay.
So
the volume is very low. If you could just maybe go closer to the mic again, I'm really struggling to hear.
Can you hear me better now?
Slightly.
Okay, so what I for the production capacity, this crude oil is coming from 3 region parts. So the first one is 2 region parts is coming from Kenya and South Sudan, and there's a study that shows that about 150 to 180,000 barrels per day is what we can get from South Sudan, and about 60 to 80 is what we can get from Kenya. So I believe that this will be able to help us to achieve that capacity. And I believe that since since they've been, storing most of these resources over time, and they were unable to commercialize it. So I think there's a study that has showed that they must have been, storing these resources over the time. So I believe that the study that shows that about 150 to 80,000 barrels for South Sudan and about 60 to 80 barrels per day for Kenya. So it's gotten from research.
Okay, and just a follow on, and apologies if you've addressed this. Perhaps did you bring up anything on the security or political risks, considering the area within which this project is being carried out?
Yeah. The fact that this project is cutting across 2 regions, we are trying to, mitigate the political risks by by leveraging on MIGA to serve as an insurance policy to help us mitigate any form of political risks. And also we want to, sign some documents that can, prevent us from being vulnerable to any government policy that might want to affect the project on a long run.
Okay, I will obviously look at the slides later, but I'm just assuming you have a slide dedicated to risks and the mitigation of those risks, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Karen. Mr. Ahmad is back. We stopped hearing you at the point where you were speaking about.
So, as I was saying, I'm particularly impressed with if you consider MEGA. However, there's a very important risk that I think you need to look at, which is the volumetric risk. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, there's an important risk that you need to consider called the volumetric risk. Why? So these locations where crude is produced, right? You don't understand the geology. Why? Because crude oil has not been produced up to 50 years there. So in my understanding, it's still a frontier market. So the geology is a big problem that you might need to consider. And as a result, this volumetric risk is something that you have to look at. I know you have the take or pay, but take or pay is only valid if there is flow. If there is no flow, the people who are producing that oil will declare force majeure, and there's nothing you can do about it, because the geological inconsistencies would push them to declare force majeure, and then that your take or pay becomes invalid, because it's a force majeure, really, right? An act of nature. And this usually happens because producers tend to flow the oil they produce fast, right? Regardless of the state of the geology. They want to recover that money early during the tax periods or the early loan repayments and so on and so forth. So one thing to do is maybe you need to look at having some level of involvement around the production as well, so that you can curtail some of those irrational behaviors. And then this is based on my experience, right? My company did the audit on the which is the longest pipeline in the entire Africa financing and post-financing audit, right? Auditing companies like Total, Sinopec, UNOC, and TPDC. So you need to look at the volumetric risk. Is very important, right? Because if you're banking on the fact that you will have that 200,000 plus barrels per day flow consistently, it may never happen, right? This is reality. Then there's also the build-up period. The build-up period, currently, you need to look at what is being produced in South Sudan. At the moment, the production is far less than that 200, far less than that 180. So that build-up period before they now start to produce what they will refine, because there's a refinery there in South Sudan, and then the excess will flow through your pipeline. That period, right? You're not generating enough to cover your cost. So that risk is also there that you have to contain properly, right? It means in your financing, you need to consider the build-up period and all the OPEX related components of that moment. Right. And thirdly, and the last one is, I know you have looked at MEGA as the rightful tool for political risk insurance, but there is something called the partial risk guarantee. And this partial risk guarantee is a very important tool that allows you to cover yourself, not around the political, is more around the credit, because the political risk is a major occurrence that can eventually trigger credit risk. So you need a partial risk guarantee as an instrument to mitigate that component. Why? Because South Sudan does not have today, right, the sovereign cover to give you today. So you need to consider it. And Kenya alone will not be able to give you that sovereign cover if you look at the financial exposure on the transaction. So thank you very much. But great presentation.
Thank you very much for the feedback. Yeah, we'll definitely look into that and integrate it in our project. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move to Group C. Group C will be speaking about LAPSET Railway Project. And before I bring them in, let me just quickly project their presentation. So for Group C, they're going to speak on LAPSET Railway Project. The railway is a key component of the LAPSET corridor designed to improve the movement of freight and passengers by connecting Kenya with Ethiopia and South Sudan, while enhancing regional connectivity and supporting economic growth across East Africa. Taking us on this presentation is Oyebanji Patai, and he will be presenting online, while his colleague Jumobi will be moving the slides for him. All right. Over to you, Onyebaji.
Good afternoon. My name is Oyebanji. I'll be presenting on LAPSET Railway Project. I hope I'm audible enough. LAPSET Railway Project is a $3 billion, 533 kilometer railway project that is going to run from Lamu Deep Sea Port to Isiolo. It's going to run Isiolo. The Lamu Deep Sea Port is in Kenya, and it's going to run to Isiolo also in Kenya. So it's part of phase one, or part of larger project of railway project that is supposed to run from Lamu Deep Sea Port to Kenya, to South Sudan and Ethiopia. So the project description is as follows: it's going to be Lamu Isiolo standard railway line. So it's proposed to run from Lamu to Isiolo, and its design capacity of 25 million tons annually with 12 million journeys for the passenger. Design speed is 120 km per hour and with 80 km freight. So the scope is meant to deliver 533 km with 5 stations. What is the benefit? It's going to benefit Lamu Deep Sea Port is just sitting without any adjoining cargo or freight operations from the hinterland of Kenya and other landlocked countries like South Sudan and Ethiopia. So it's going to serve all these countries along this corridor and all these freight operations that is running on the highways. Next slide, please. Next slide. So what's the project context? So like I said earlier on, the majority of the freight operations, freight or passenger operations always runs on the island. So most especially those traffic that is coming from South Sudan and Ethiopia, the southern part of Ethiopia. Most of it from the South Sudan, it runs through the Mombasa port, which is highly congested, and the other route for the Ethiopia is going through the Djibouti route, also very, very long distance. So this particular railway station that is going, the first phase, which is going to run from this Lamu Deep Sea Port to Isiolo, is going to reduce cost, and it's going to reduce travel times for South Sudan, and also decongest the Mombasa port as well. And it's going to create alternative routes or access for Ethiopia as well. And it's going to kind of increase the confluence area of Isiolo. Next slide. So what is the policy context and strategic objective? The policy context and strategic objective is part of Kenya Vision 2030, which identifies infrastructure as a key catalyst for economic development and recognized LAPSES corridor as a flagship national project. So the strategic objective is to enhance regional connectivity by improved transport efficiency and reduce logistic costs for this region, and also support regional integration of Kenya, South Sudan, and Ethiopia. This phase also is also, this first phase of this larger project is also with these stations is going to kind of increase urbanization and create jobs and inclusive growth, with sustainability and climate goals inclusive as well. Next slide. So the social-economic objective is to, with this project, is going to create 60,000 direct jobs and 60,000 direct jobs and 25,000 jobs during this operation, and reduction in transport costs for this freight and passengers who relies on the land transport system for their cargo operations as well. So it's going to increase urbanization. So this project is also going to align with sustainable development goals by reducing poverty and increase industrial innovation and infrastructure, and also align with SDG 17 partnership for the goals, that is multi-stakeholder partnership, pulling financial resources together to kind of do a large-scale infrastructure as a railway project. Next slide. So the project is going to align with the legal and regulatory context of the most especially the Constitution of Kenya, the Public-Private Partnership, and the Kenya Railway Corporation Act of 1917, and all other, most especially LAPSES Corridor Development Authority Order of 2013, which is a larger body for this particular large development authority for this particular region, that is Kenya and Ethiopia and South Sudan. Next slide. So where is the project? The project is going to run. This railway project is going to run from, like I said, it's going to run from Lamu District Port to Isiolo. And what are the demand drivers for this is that because Lamu has a deep sea port, and it has capacity to kind of accommodate large ships and high cargo traffic as well. So the demand drivers is also has to do with agricultural and manufacturing products that is going to be coming in from the hinterland, most especially from this landlocked states of South Sudan and Ethiopia. So it has competitive advantage of the station and depot that we are going to be building around this particular corridor. So this particular railway station is meant to kind of, in the long run, and after the other phases has finished, is going to kind of open up other routes of Juba and Ethiopia to Lamu Deep Sea Port. But this first phase that we are going to do is 533 kilometers that is going to stop at Isiolo. So we expect all that traffic that is going to be coming from Juba and Ethiopia to be coming through Isiolo on the railway track. Next slide, please. So these are the leadership team of Globus Nigeria Limited, which are the sponsor for this particular project. They are the project company that is going to kind of usher in this particular railway station into existence. Next slide, please. So what's the justification for this particular project, or why are we having this standardized project for Lamu Isiolo Railway project? Similar project has also been done with Ethiopia Djibouti standard gauge railway line, which is in operation as we speak. So it has this project cost, speed, freight operations, and traffic forecast as this. So we based that on that. We based it on this. We benchmark these on this Ethiopia Djibouti standard railway line to do ours, with a little modification as regards to the traction. While they are using electric coal, how electric coal for the locomotive, we are looking at electric and biogas for ours as well, so that we align with climatic goals and international requirements. So we base all our assumptions based on what we have done, what is being done in this Eastern Africa with this Ethiopia Djibouti SG standard gauge railway line. So the cost advantage, the efficient cost, is going to have efficient cost and features compared to similar projects in the region. So it's going to it's a standard SGR with capacity and capability for dual traction of electric and biogas. Next slide. Next slide. So who are the project stakeholders for this particular project? We have project sponsor, which is Jubus Nigeria Limited, that's going to have 30% equity stake in this, and SPV, which is Lapsar Railway Development Limited, the special purpose vehicles that is going to usher in this particular project, which is going to enter agreement with the government of Kenya and the regional authority as IGAD and the regional and LAPSET, that is Lamu Port, South Sudan Equatorial Transport Authority. So we're also going to be having multilateral and bilateral lenders in the form of AFDB or World Bank and the China Exim Bank for senior debt and development finance as well. So our EPC contractor on O&M and transaction advisors are yet to be determined, but they are going to be looking at engineering, procurement, construction of the railway operations and maintenance, which is going to be considered to the the railway operation and maintenance as well. So we are going to be having off-takers. Our off-takers will be the freight shippers and the logistics firms. So we are going to have different forms of revenues, which is going to be either take or pay contract revenue based and revenue streams that is going to be coming from this five intermodal hubs that we are going to be building along this corridor. So we have our insurance providers, which is going to guarantee us on guarantee our political, construction, and operational risk that will involve in the construction of this particular project. Next slide, please. So this is the project transaction grid. So we are going to be having concession agreement with the government of Kenya and Asset Corridor Development Authority. The special purpose vehicle is going to enter, is going to add, is going to get a permit, land and right of way and concession right from this from the Kenyan authority. With this, we are going to have an EPC contract with a reliable contractor through a competitive bidding, and our debt financing will be coming from, like I said, will be coming from senior lenders and the China Exim Bank and the export credit agencies that we tend to kind of incorporate into this. So our revenues is going to come in two streams that we are looking at. We are looking at contract based, which is going to be a take or pay freight contract that we are going to be signing with some of these freight operators in this along this corridor. Also, we are going to be having market based, that is passenger tariffs that will coming from this that is going to be utilizing these railway systems as well. So we are going to be having logistics hub concession, just like I said, for this intermodal hub that we are going to be building along this corridor for these 5 stations that we are going to be having. So the owners is going to be the Jubus Nigeria Limited, the host government, DFI, and co-investors, and other equity providers. Next slide, please. So these are the key agreement and contractual relationships that we are going to be having with the special purpose vehicles, with the special purpose vehicles with the host government, with the co-investors, the SPVs with the African financial institutions, as well as the World Bank and the Exim Banks. So we are going to have, so this particular agreement is meant to take care of take-outs and risk is going to share balance and variable risk allocation to all parties that is involved. So such as political risk as well, which we're going to be mentioning along the slide. So like a concession agreement is going to take care of political risk that is going to be coming from government, and construction operation risk to the SPVs. So we are going to be having shareholders agreement as we are going to allocate the risk, equity at risk subordinated to the senior debt as well. So as regards to risk mapping and mitigation plan, we said we are going to have a lot of risk that has to do with commercial risk, regulatory and political risk. Commercial risk as regards to demand and shortfall in demand, revenue concentration or construction cost overruns on operator performance. Like demand and traffic shortfall, we have mitigation plans for all these. Like demand and traffic shortfall, we have a long-term take-or-pay agreement and minimum throughput guarantees with anchor off-takers and state-owned enterprises like Kenya Railway Corporations. So we are going to also have mitigation plans as regards revenue concentration by diversifying this off-take mix across freight classes, passenger services, and port landing services as well. So regulatory and political risk also will also be mitigated through stabilization clauses as regards policy and regulatory changes from the host government. We are also going to be having environmental social impact assessment for land acquisition assessment plan that may affect this that may come in as regards this particular project from Lamu to Isiolo. So we're also going to have a dedicated resettlement action plan for budget for this resettlement of those who's going to be affected along these corridors. So we are going to so also next slide please. So if any risk as regards force majeure from the climatic issues maybe along the way, we're having anything that can impact or affect this particular railway from being disturbed. So we have a resident engineering standard that actually this particular project, the feasibility study is almost complete, and it's called the feasibility is for this particular project is for the Kenya section is in pipeline. For natural disasters, we have insurance contract that is going to mitigate against this. So macroeconomics and financial risk is also is part of it. Is part of the risk that will affect this railway project that will affect it from coming into completion. So we have risk such as risk affecting bankability, such as currency and forex volatility. So mitigation plans we have is to index this offtake agreement, also forex hedging instruments and convertible insurance, so that we'll be able to pay our lenders and also finance our operations and also give our dividends to our equity providers as well. So interest rate and refinancing risk is also will be mitigated by acquiring this debt stack with fixed rate development financial institutions tranches like the one from the EFDB and international financial corporations, and applying interest rate swaps to commercial bank portions. So subordinate debt capacity, we also intend to have a PPT structure designed to minimize unbalanced sheet sovereign exposure. So these are the 4 areas of risk that we have highlighted, and with their mitigation action plan. Yes. So our approach to bankability is robust. Our approach to bankability stands on three pillars. That is predictable cash flow, phased construction, delivery, and operations with governance and sustainability. These are put in place in order to pay for a robust cash flow, and so predictable cash flow is going to stay on our predictable cash flow is premised on freight services, passenger services, and train station rentals. For freight services, we are going to be having off-takers with multiple haulers that is going to along that particular corridor and beyond as well. So we have Gulf Energy, Dangote Industries, Africorp, and Transit Kenya and Kisa Logistics as well. So our passenger services, our revenue is going to coming from pay agreement and from Kenya Railway Corporation that is going to bring their own stock on the train as well. So we have train station rentals that is we are going to do concession or outsourcing of these 5 intermodal that we intend to build along this corridor to food vendors, advertising companies, hospitality business, and luggage storage companies. So we intend to have 3 revenue streams that is going to come in from these railway stations. Next slide. Our fixed construction delivery, which is one of the pillars of bankability plan, is to have a fixed price turnkey EPC contract with any contractor to be determined. Is going to be an experienced EPC contractor. Is going to go through a competitive bidding that is going to align with International Commercial Bank ICB standard. So our project delivery timeline is going to be with a financial closing on 31st January 2027. Through commercial operation date of 31st July 2029. So we intend to start our operations by 31st July 2029. The 5K stations is going to start in quarter 2 of 2027. That is Lamu to station 1, while it's going to run through to station 4 to station 4 to station 5 is expected to be completed in quarter 4 of 2028. Next slide. So our governance and sustainability cut across the shareholders agreement, board directors, board meetings, board committees, shareholders meetings. These are put in place in order to give credibility, transparency to whatever what we are doing in these particular operations. So like a shareholders agreement is going to be executed between all shareholders and include bank guarantees and letter of credit to backstop shareholders' obligations. Our board directors will be composed of mix of independent directors, executive and non-executive directors with experience and about this project. So our quarterly meetings will be held to ensure effective management of this. SPV will be set up to set audit risk management and social ethics committee, and with annual meetings of shareholders or ordinary general meetings as well due as needed as well. So we are going to conduct comprehensive environmental and social impact assessment, consultation with communities and workers as well. So this will be in line in such a way that it is going to guarantee occupational and safety programs for the workers. Next slide. So our project finance roadmap is expected that in quarter 1, first year we are going to have an initial bankability planning report, a concession agreement signing with the government of Kenya on concept design. Quarter 2 is going to have equity closing with sponsors, shareholders agreement, governance policy. And quarter 3 is going to involve due diligence and negotiation, finance documentation with lenders, quick credit enhancement, and EPC contract. We expect to have financial close by quarter 4. Our key financial documentation is as this, with a common terms agreement with our consortium of our lenders and individual loan agreement. That is we are going to have equity support agreement, security and direct agreement, and account agreement. These are all the agreement that is going to embody or enshrine.
Okay, excuse me.
Common terms.
Oyebanji, you have less than a minute left.
Next slide, please.
So you need to wrap up.
So we are going to credit this particular project with liquidated damages and offtake agreement and insurance aspects. So we are going to implement with implementation agreement with Kenya government to seek assurance that the project will not be confiscated or spoliated or nationalized. Next slide. So our project assume capital is going to have a 3 billion. We expect this CapEx to be $3 billion with a projected internal revenue 2.75, which is quite good. Minimum debt ratio is 2.67. This is going to go into our pre-development activities, feasibility study, environmental and social impact assessment, and bankability studies. Next slide, please. So budget and investment proposition or value proposition is going to go first financial expert and legal expert and economics as well. So we are going to have that time invest revenues with a defined seed investment with a defined seed investment, which will unlock this $2.1 billion at close. So we require next slide. Next slide, please. So we require $3 million in seed funding. So what is it going to do? It's going to engage engineering consultant, engage owners, and then do studies are done. Once the studies are done, the project will be brought to construction and readiness. In 1 year, we should have had 100% completion of preliminary studies. Immediate next steps, if funded, is to establish project company, commission the feasibility engineering, environmental study, and bankability. So that point, technical and financial and legal studies. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you.
you very much, Group C. Do we have any questions from the jurors or comments?
First, congratulations. The presentation was well done and was understandable. And thank you for the organizers, because this presentation was much clearer. Technical wise, so it was easier to follow. I won't go on the project finance side because I can see that they kind of paid a lot of attention to that. What I would just ask is more on the demand side. On the demand side, you have Kenya, you have Ethiopia, I think, and South Sudan. And I would really ask my question on demand, why you think you can get, the right demand for this service. And I ask that because we have Ethiopia that has access to the Djibouti port, I think. And again, I'm coming like with the previous presentations, the instability that continues in South Sudan. It seems to be hinging a lot on Kenya. Is that the right way to look at this?
Thank you for the question. Actually, yes, this first phase is just like an introduction into what we are going to be looking at. So it's going to start from Lamu to Isiolo. This particular project is the southern part of Kenya, which does not have access to Mombasa route. The Mombasa port. The Mombasa port is feeding the northern part of Kenya. This particular route is meant to feed not only Isiolo, which is also a commercial area and an intersection for all other goods that may be coming from South Sudan, let's say, but our feasibility studies and current studies show that 267,000 passenger traffic always fly from that issue down to Lamu Port. Not to talk about the freight that is always going on the highway. So the other route, which South Sudan has, the major gateway is through Mombasa Port, while the Ethiopia has through Djibouti Port. The Djibouti Port is longer for those who are in the southern part of Ethiopia. So this particular route is more closer and it is cost effective. So the Ethiopia can move those who are in the southern part of Ethiopia can move their traffic through Isiolo down to Lamu Port. Also for South Sudan, this particular traffic is high. So they can also bypass Djibouti, which is also has some political quagmires of political quagmires they have in the Djibouti route. So they can easily move their traffic down to the southern part of Kenya, the southern part of Ethiopia through this Lamu port. Also, the South Sudan depend on Mombasa route, which is quite longer. No matter how, still having a lot of traffic that is coming through the highway. So they can easily, instead of going through Mombasa, which is longer in the northern part of Kenya, can also go through this Isiolo part. Despite the fact that we are still looking at the larger project of the railway getting to Nakodok in South Sudan or Mombasa in Ethiopia. This highway traffic can concentrate all their cargo traffic and all the rest at Isiolo, moving on to the train down to the Lamu port. So we are expecting high traffic from either the southern part of Ethiopia and the northern part of the southern part of South Sudan coming on to Isiolo.
Okay, thanks for that. Something else I'll urge you to look at is obviously regional projects are notoriously more difficult to implement and to get off the ground. Mostly due to a few things. You have the commitment, cross-border commitments from the countries that they serve, and coordination. Coordination. We found out that a lot of projects we have, regional projects, stall because while on paper you have what looks like a good coordination framework, on the ground, due to political instabilities, due to change of governments, and a number of other things, regional projects do take a while structure and to get off the ground. So if you could just incorporate that, and maybe you have, and I'll look at it again, like as with the previous presentations I mentioned, I was going to go through it again. I realize that we don't have a lot of time, but just pointing that out, particularly the cross-border aspect of this project. So I'll pass on to anyone else who has a comment or question to add.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen, and thank you to Group C. We can't take any more questions or comments because our time is fast spent, so we have to move to the last presentation. But thank you and well done to Group C. Thank you, Oye Banji. I'm just going to stop sharing and project Group D's presentation. Group D will be presenting the Trans-Sahara Optic Fiber Project. This project seeks to expand high-speed fiber optic connectivity across the Sahara, linking countries in North and Sub-Saharan Africa to strengthen digital infrastructure, improve cross-border communications, and support the continent's digital transformation. Taking us on this presentation is Taiwo Udusanya. Taiwo, over to you.
All right. Thank you, JC, for the nice introduction. So I'll be walking us through our project on Trans-Sahara Optic Fiber Project, prepared by Group D. So these are the members of our group, from the team lead down to Abdullahi Adamu. So next on the slide is quickly the project description. So we identified there is a problem across these host countries, Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria. And one of the problems we are trying to solve is that we are trying to solve a limited connectivity internet connectivity across these countries, Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria. So that is the problem we are trying to solve, and also to create a reliable internet access to these participating countries. So the solution is that we are trying to build a 4,500 kilometer open access fiber backbone in Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria with 15 terabits per second carrier grade capacity. So this intends to create an alternative Euro-based way and deliver a wholesale connectivity to telecom operators, ISPs, which is the internet service providers. So next thing on the slide is the project scope. So this is trying to explain what our project covers, the scope of our project. So like I said earlier, it's our corridor is the main corridor is Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria. So about 4,500 kilometer distance, and the components of this our project is runs from designs down to construction, testing, and the likes. So who are the beneficiaries of this project? The telecom operators, internet service providers, government, businesses, SMEs, and over 2 million people across this corridor, like I mentioned earlier, Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria. So what are these, the out of scope of this project? That is what our project does not cover, is that it does not cover retail broadband services. So moving on, the context of our project is that this project is anchored under African Union PIDA and PAP2 as a strategic Trans-Sahara broadband corridor. And also, the social, economic, and SDG impacts of this our project is that we are trying to expand digital inclusion and access to e-learning, telemedicine, e-government, and financial inclusion. We want also to create job creation, as also private sector innovation, and also to foster regional trade and economic growth. So the SDGs that our project addresses is one is well-being. So our projects address SDG 3, which is well-being and good health. That is, virtual healthcare services, and SDG 4, which is quality education. So that is this. Our project tries to address the issue of limited access to the internet resources, especially the underserved communities. Then the legal and regulatory context of our project is for Nigeria, we are having NCC, which is Nigerian Communication Commission. Then for Niger, we are having ARCEP, and for Algeria, it's being regulated by ARCE. So next on the slide is the project location of our project. So like I mentioned earlier, our project runs from Lagos to Katsina, Zinda in Niger, terminating Algiers in Algeria. So approximately about 4,500 kilometers. So forming a strategic digital bridge between the West and the North Africa. So what are the things that the project addresses here is that it follows an established cross-border transport corridor and also integrates national and international fiber networks. So moving on, the project company, we are going to form Group D, which we have given ourselves a name, which is Ikivia Limited. So we want to form a consortium with Ete Niger, Globalcom for Nigeria, and Algeria Telecom and African Finance Corporation to form a consortium. So why are we being strategic about this potential private investors that we are bringing on board? Is because looking at the industry and looking at the fact that this is their domain, that is why we are ensuring that we are bringing in the telecommunication operators in each of these countries, on board, so that they can also, increase the project's bankability and also the risk revenue, and also bring their experience. So that means that they are not just bringing in finances, they are also bringing their industry expert, considering the fact that this is their domain. So that is why we are being strategic in, having these proposed private investors, to form our consortium. Also, we are also part of this consortium is that we also propose to form a concessional agreement with the host countries, which is Algeria, Niger, and Nigeria. So moving on, the project sizing. The rationale behind this project sizing is that looking at the magnitude of this project, so our project is about 4.5 billion approximately. That's the project cost. So looking at the financial constraints, we have decided that we are going to do this project in phases. So that is that the first phase is going to start from Nigeria to Niger, and the second phase is going to start from Niger to Algeria, and the final phase is going to consider the branches, which is Chad and Mali. So this is because this is for us to mitigate, the financial pressure or the financial requirement of these projects, looking at the fact that the project cost is about $4.5 billion. So that is why we have decided that we are going to do this project in phases, to reduce the pressure or the financial requirement. So as highlighted on the slide, phase 1 Nigeria to Niger, then phase 2 Niger to Algeria, then the branch line Chad to Mali. So moving on, the project stakeholders, we have the private sector, we have the public sector, financial institution, and other stakeholders. So who are the people that that is made up of the public sector? That is the government of these host countries, Nigeria, Niger, and Algeria. So they are going to provide support in terms of, right of way, permits, licensing, and the likes like that. Also, the private sector is made up of the EIDC, which is a Kivia Infrastructure Development Company that is providing 30% equity stake in this project. Then also we're having our SPV, which is Trans-Sahara Broadband Infrastructure Limited. So that is a separate legal entity that is going to, run the project on behalf of the project stakeholders. Then our proposed financial institution is African Development Bank, World Banks, and the likes. Then other stakeholders are telecom operators, MTN, Airtel, Globalcom, and the likes like that. And also the local community is also part of the other stakeholders. So now we have on the screen is our project transaction grid. So from the private sponsor, like I mentioned earlier, which is the Ikiva Infrastructure Development Company, which is a consortium that is being formed by the project sponsors, in partnership with other potential private investors I mentioned earlier, the likes of Globalcom for Nigeria, Airtel, and the likes. So then the public sectors, the government of these host countries, Algeria, Niger, and Nigeria. Then the lenders, our proposed lenders. So we have decided that we are going to use a blended finance for these our projects. Looking at the financial requirements, so we have decided that we are going to seek for 50% of the project's cost from senior lenders. So our proposed senior lenders will be IFC, International Finance Corporation, African Development Banks, and also a 30% loan from subordinate lenders, which they are also known as junior lenders, which our proposed lenders are Bank of Africa in Nigeria, then UBA Bank. So the consortium is going to have a concession agreement with the public sectors and also a loan agreement with the lenders. So then that will lead to formation of SPV, which is a Trans-Sahara Broadband Infrastructure Project Limited, like I mentioned earlier. So we are going to have an offtake agreement in order to de-risk, revenue. So an offtake agreement with this MTN Nigeria, Airtel Nigeria, Globalcom, and so on. So the kind of offtake agreements that happens in a telecommunication sector is IRU, which is indivisible right of use. So that is the offtake agreement that is being used in telecommunication sector. So that is kind of the offtake agreement that we are proposing to use. Also, moving on, we are going to have a stakeholder engagements with the landowners, communities, the landowners and the communities in which the fiber is going to pass through, in order to mitigate insecurity risks and the likes. Also, we are going to have an EPC agreement with. We are proposed to use YE as our EPC contractor and operation maintenance operator. And the reason for that is because from our research, we found out that they have deployed a lot of fiber infrastructure across Africa, and they have a very good institutional credibility across Africa. So, and that is why we have decided to go with them in our project. Also, we are going to sign an insurance contract with our proposed insurance companies, Alliance, African Trade and Investment Development Insurance. So moving on to the next slide, the risk mapping. So one thing that is very common about infrastructure projects is risks. And we have identified, the key risks which we have classified here into 4 categories. And, the first one on the list is commercial risks, which is issues, the issues that can arise here. It could be, a shortfall in revenue. And how do we intend to mitigate that is that, we are going to have an offtake agreement that I mentioned earlier, IRU, which is a indivisible right of use offtake agreement. So with the telecommunications operators, the likes of MTN and internet service providers in order to de-risk or mitigate the issue of revenue. Then moving on the next risk we have is financial risk. Issue of FX exposure, micro risks and the likes like that. So we are going to take on political risk insurance from MIGA in order to mitigate these risks, financial risks. And also another thing that we are going to do is that we are going to undertake a lot of hedging strategies in order to mitigate this, especially FX exposures. And also we will try to structure our offtake agreements in a way whereby maybe 80% of our revenue is being collected in local currency and 20% is being collected in dollars in order to mitigate the FX exposure. Another thing that we propose that we could do, or we are going to have in our offtake agreement, is a clause which is that we are going to put a clause that there is a tendency of tariff review when in order to there's sorry please, I mean we are going to review tariff based on inflation rates and the likes like that. So in order to keep up with servicing the debt. Then next on the list is the legal and regulatory risk. Issues of right of way, issues of approvers. So we are going to mitigate that with the government of the host country. So moving on, we're having our sponsor risk mitigation. So how do we intend to mitigate the sponsor risk? Like I said earlier, our consortium is made up of telecommunication operators, Globacom, Airtel, Niger, and the likes like that. So these guys are not just bringing in finance into the project; they are bringing in their industry experts in this domain and looking at the fact that this is their domain already. So and that is one of the ways that we intend to mitigate sponsor risks. So also we are going to share risks with the governments. The government of the host countries gets right of way permits and the likes. So quickly on our approach to bankability. So we have three approaches to bankability here, which is predictable cash flow, construction and delivery operation, sustainability and governance. So how do we intend to have a predictable cash flow? Is that we are going to use an open access wholesale model, like I said earlier, that the offtake agreement that we are going to have with our offtakers is a IRU, which is indivisible right of use. So that is kind of offtake agreement that we are going to have with our offtakers in order to de-risk revenue. So moving on, in order to ensure that we have a fixed construction and delivery and operation, so we are proposed to use YE as our EPC contractor and also as our operation and maintenance operator based on their successful projects they have across Africa. And also we are also going to negotiate with Pisman Group for fiber procurement. We have decided to choose them because they are one of the largest fiber manufacturer in the world. So moving on governance and sustainability, we are going to form our SPZ, which is going to this is a legal entity that is going to run the project, which is TBI LP, which is Trans-Sahara Broadband Infrastructure Limited. So moving on our project finance roadmap quickly. So we move from project origination down to financial close. So from there, after we have reached a financial close and the lenders are ready to deploy their money into the project, then we will begin construction. So moving quickly, these are our ways, the ways that we intend to do key credit enhancement. Provide political risk, take on the political risk insurance through MEGA, and also to protect against war risks, especially the northern side of Nigeria. Looking at the fact that there is a lot of insecurity, in the northern part of Nigeria. So how do we tend to, mitigate this kind of risk? Is that we are going to, take on political risk insurance from MEGA, and also we are going to engage the stakeholders in this community in a way whereby we are going to, use some of these people in this community to, as a security officer or personnel, to safeguard the fiber and like. So moving on quickly, this is our project cost and assumed capital structure. So we are requesting here today for a $4.96 million seed funding equity. So to begin or to carry out our pre-development activities. So moving from feasibility, conducting feasibility and commercial studies, EESII, which is environmental and social impact assessment across these host countries, down to legal and regulatory cross-border licensing, setting up an SPV, and also to provide a contingency. So we are requesting for an amount of $4.96 million as a seed funding in order to carry out this pre-development activity of this project. So moving back quickly. Okay, thank you. So moving back quickly. So the financial highlights is that the project's internal rate of return is about 19.2%, and so what does that tell the lenders is that this project is commercially viable, and also return on equity that tells the investors that our project is commercially viable from the percentage the ROE, which is return on equity that we're having from our financial model. And also our payback period for our loan after the COD date is 5 years, and also we're having an average DSCR which is above the minimum standard of 1.5 average DSCR in the industry. Also we are discounting our cash flow by 18%. So which our project IRR is higher than our discount rate. So that shows that, what does that tell our lenders is that this is a project that is viable commercially, looking at the fact that our project IRR is greater than our discount rate. So then our revenue. So quickly, which is the last slide, which is the EBITDA. So over the 10 years, from the first year, we are going to the projected revenue is about $2,592 million. So it increases over the years, and in the 10th year, we're having about $2,447 million in revenue. So what does that tell our lenders and potential investors is that we're having a resilient cash flow, because our cash flow is increasing over time, over the years. So the EBITDA too, which is earnings before interest, taxes, and depreciation and amortization. Also in the first year we're having about $1,324 million, and that also increases over time, which is a very good margin. To the 10th year, we're having about $1,706 million. So this does and we know that our lenders and potential investors are very peculiar about numbers. So, and that is why we have been able to project this from our financial model. So, we believe that from this projection that we have from our financial model, our potential investors and lenders will be able to invest in our project. Thank you.
All right, well done, Group D. Thank you very much. I will just open the floor to the jurors for questions and comments.
Hi, I think I'm the only juror list online. So first, congratulations on the presentation. You presented a lot of interesting facts. As just feedback on just improvements that you can make, not necessarily for discussion right now, but if you could strengthen a bit in your presentation, the evidence behind your assumptions. You have a good commercial approach, financing approach, but if you just support it sometimes with a bit more evidence. I think you talked a lot about securing anchor customers and obtaining cross-border approvals and all of that. Again, as I did with the previous presentation, it all sounds very good on paper, but it's usually quite a challenging thing to do. So I know we normally, some of our projects usually have results-based frameworks, and these usually bring out these issues that you could maybe highlight in presentations. Apart from that, I think, well, you have an existing infrastructure, so I think the question would be maybe what's your value added, what the project brings that is not already there, and you have Starlink, that's a major competitor. How do you pull them in, and how do you work with them? Obviously, success of this sort of thing depends really on high traffic volume and which sectors actually going to provide that. So we look at that and the various countries that are involved in this. I think it's really more observations than really questions per se. But again, like with the other presenters, I really loved all the projects and the way they were all presented. And I think unfortunately the others are not yet to provide more feedback, but I would go through them and provide more detailed feedback as I would if these projects were coming to my desk in a PPF, so that you could use that. But overall, it's been good work. So congratulations.
Thank you, Mom.
All right, thank you very much, Karen, for that feedback, and thank you to you, Taiwo, for your presentation, and to the whole of Group D. Well done. So we've come to the end of the infra pitch session, and I'd like to say thank you for sticking with us, and I'll pass the mic back to Chisom.
All right, thank you very much, Jacinda. So we've just got to experience 4 outstanding teams share projects with real potential to reshape infrastructure across the continent. So we've heard from submarine fiber cables to hydropower, from cross-border highway to water transfers, and the range and depth of this idea that we saw today was truly inspiring. I'd like to say a huge thank you to the presenters for their hard work, the preparation, the professionalism, and I'd like to say a very huge thank you to the jurors for the feedback that has added so much value, and we are very, very grateful for taking out the time from your busy schedules to be here with us today. To our audience, thank you very much for showing up the way you did, and your interactions made today's session much richer. So we're going to move to the closing remark for the EESII, and this will be taken by the founder of the African Catalyst, Mr. Femi Awufala. Over to you, Mr. Femi.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Oh, wow. It's been a great day. And this is our 3rd edition of the Enabling Early Stage Infrastructure Roundtable. And it's been a long time coming. One of the things we've seen here is the fact that early stage infrastructure needs a different mindset. You typically will find out that pitching early stage infrastructure projects is way different from pitching even an SME project or even a corporate finance deal. Most times you don't have the capital, you don't have the connections, you don't have the stakeholders, but you have a clear line of sight. You have a clear mindset of what the project should do, what the project should achieve, and how the project should be bankable. This is our core within the African Catalyst. These are our ethos, and this is why we believe that enabling early stage infrastructure is such an important element in the whole infrastructure discussion process. Typically, you will find that a majority of projects today within the African space haven't been able to achieve financial close. Why? Because they don't have the right foundation upon which those projects should be built upon. We encourage you, various stakeholders, partners, DFIs, philanthropies, and various impact investors. We need to bring early stage infrastructure investing back. In the 80s and in the 90s, it was quite easy for you to invest in an early stage infrastructure project because the information is available and there's clarity and there's patience. But now, a number of funders or lenders or even investors are quite in a hurry to be able to achieve financial close. And lenders are very much diligent now because they believe that not every project that seems nice, seems attractive, seems, impactful is actually bankable. However, no one is paying attention to sitting with these young entrepreneurs, working with them in an investment readiness process, incubating them as we've had in the investment and in the technology space, and getting them investment ready. This is what we've done within the African Catalyst over the last 8 weeks with the various pitches you've heard. We believe we can do more, and we welcome you to join us in this journey. We know it's not going to be easy because we are at the real bottom end of every investment discussion. We believe that we need to go back to the ground zero and get projects get projects to have the right level of capacity building, which will translate to the right level of project preparation and finally the right level of investment being made. I really want to thank you again for all your contributions, right from the panel session we had this morning to the various infra pitches from the members of the DFIP program and all you've done so far. I really thank you for the support. It's not been easy, but we thank God that at this point, we've been able to close out EESII 3.0 and 4.0 will come on very soon. Please watch out, follow our social media handles, and you will hear from us very soon. Thank you once again and have a good day. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, Mr. Femi. Those are very, very powerful notes to close on. So like I said, please do follow us on social media. Our website is theafricancatalyst.com and we are the African Catalyst on every social media app except TikTok. And just like that, we've reached the end of EESII 3.0. Today was rich with conversations, and I think the conversations had in this virtual room today reflect a shared commitment to shaping Africa's infrastructure future. To our panelists, to our speakers, jurors, presenters, thank you for taking your time and the expertise you brought. To our partners, Brickstone Africa, Kenya Partners, the Nigeria Wind Energy Council, and the Business Year, thank you all for making this possible. And to each and every one of you in the virtual room, thank you for showing up. Until next time, let's keep building and believing in the possibility of Africa's infrastructure. And goodbye, everyone.